Chapter 106, Vision and Hand Speed. That sheet of white paper was already filled with writing. It held the marriage vows Ling Zhao had written for Lan Luofeng. Every vow on the paper just proved that Ling Zhao was totally henpecked one. The chip was the control chip of Ling Zhao's wealth. With this chip alone, Lan Luofeng would be able to forcefully transfer all of Ling Zhao's worldly possessions to someone else's communicator without having to get Ling Zhao's approval. Meanwhile, that keychain was modeled after Ling Zhao's mecha. What this really represented, or if there was any deeper meaning to it, Lan Luofeng had never told Ling Lan. She had only told Ling Lan that of these three things, the most valuable was actually this keychain, but now it had become just a souvenir. Ling Zhao looked at the three items before him with a complicated expression, but he was clearly moved. However, he very quickly managed to calm his almost overflowing emotions and raised his head to smile blindingly at Ling Lan. "Congratulations, Ling Lan, you've passed. You shall receive Ling Zhao's legacy, my legacy. My child, I'm so very happy today." Ling Zhao's smile caused Ling Lan to become awestruck. Now she finally understood why her mum would always lose her mind in fantasies whenever she talked about her dad. Her dad's sincere smile was just too stunning. Even in this future world where one could find beautiful men and women everywhere, her dad's looks were definitely still of the godlike legendary level. Ling Zhao made Ling Lan stand before him. At this moment, he was silent. After a long while, a light trace of loss appeared on his expression, and he said, "Honestly, I don't wish for this legacy mission to appear because its appearance would mean that I'm really gone. If possible, I really want to accompany my wife and be by your side as you grow up. I can't bear to let you both go." "My child, I don't even know if you're a boy or a girl. I really wish I could see for myself how you look like, whether you resemble me or your mum." Ling Zhao's loss of composure lasted for only a split second. He soon regained his equilibrium and said self-mockingly, "What's with this sentimentality? Is this the result of the wavering of belief? What a terrible feeling." Ling Zhao recovered his usual smile once more and looked at Ling Lan. The nameless tenderness in his gaze caused Ling Lan's heart to spasm, as all sorts of emotions rose up within her heart. Ling Lan knew very well that Ling Zhao was definitely not looking at her right now. This Ling Zhao was a manifestation of spiritual energy from 8 years ago. Perhaps this affectionate gaze was meant for Lan Luofeng, and maybe included some anticipation for his then unborn child. But for some unknown reason, this scene just tugged at Ling Lan's heartstrings, making her heart ache. She didn't know if it was because she had merged with this body completely, causing her to be unable to control her emotions when faced with this body's biological father. Ling Zhao said, "I believe that my child is the strongest child. I will entrust your mum to you. You must definitely make her happy. I'm an irresponsible husband, and also an irresponsible father. I've failed you both." Ling Lan tried to speak, but Ling Zhao made a stopping motion. "Don't speak. Let me hold on to my fantasy a while longer. You will call me daddy earnestly, and then say I love you." That said, Ling Zhao smiled bitterly and said hoarsely, "Isn't that just a useless daydream? An irresponsible person like me. If I get a scolding, it would already be too easy on me. What right do I have to ask you, my child, to call me daddy too?" Ling Lan's mouth twitched, but she did not call out daddy in the end. Although she knew that Ling Zhao was her dad of this life, and Ling Zhao was extremely familiar to her due to the constant reminiscences of her mum, the address of daddy was really quite difficult for the mentally mature Ling Lan to voice out. Ling Lan could only put the blame on this man across from her. He was just too young, causing her mind to inexplicably rebel against the very idea. Dejection flashed through Ling Zhao's gaze. Those words of his were actually an indirect plea for his child to call him daddy. He didn't dare to ask directly, because he felt he had wronged his child. Sadly, the truth was really just as he had feared. His child truly hated him and was unwilling to call him daddy. This reality made him feel very hurt. The Ling Zhao of 8 years ago had imagined many possibilities of this encounter, and this was one which he had most hoped not to see. Regardless of how dejected Ling Zhao felt, he still began to teach his first lesson. Ling Lan thought that the first lesson would be Ling Zhao's exclusive physical skills or something along those lines. Mind you, the very first lesson she received when she first entered the learning space, and also when she first entered the Central Scout Academy, was physical skills, other than theoretical studies. After all, the basics were the most important. "Are you wondering why we aren't starting with physical skills?" asked the Ling Zhao of 8 years ago, having predicted Ling Lan's puzzlement. Since Ling Zhao was the one to ask, Ling Lan naturally nodded without any hesitation, and waited for Ling Zhao to explain. Smiling, Ling Zhao told Ling Lan that the Academy's basic physical skills set was the accumulation of the efforts of countless talents over tens of thousands of years. It was definitely one of the best foundational physical skills set available, so before Ling Lan fully mastered that set of physical skills, he would not teach Ling Lan any other physical skills, including his own exclusive physical skills. Many people, before their basics had been built properly, would already attempt to learn physical skills or spiritual skills of a higher level. This was completely wrong. Think about it. If you try to build a building when your foundations haven't even been settled yet, how would you be able to build a tall building? Ling Zhao was unsure how the other legendary operators had advanced to their level, but Ling Zhao's advancement was closely tied to his foundations. Back then, Ling Zhao had only wanted to prove himself to his father his own way, and so had refused to learn the Ling family's secret physical skills. Instead, he had trained in the Academy's foundational physical skills until he mastered it to its extreme. In the process, he had touched on the most profound meaning of foundational physical skills, which showed him a path to advance to legendary status. "What does it mean to fully master it?" asked Ling Lan, puzzled. She already knew the foundational physical skills by heart. Could it be that she still hadn't been doing it right? When you can execute this set of physical skills without having to think about it, no longer limited to the stances, about then, you will naturally understand, explained Ling Zhao briefly. He didn't want Ling Lan to be impatient. She was still young and had plenty of time. "Now, what I can teach you is how to improve your eyesight and hand speed. These are things that you cannot lack for either combat or operating mecha," said Ling Zhao. "They are both things that require hard work to train, especially finger speed, that needs to be trained beginning from youth, while the bones of the fingers haven't fully grown yet and are still extremely flexible. Only then can you develop your personal limits to its maximum." That said, Ling Zhao suddenly lifted up a palm. A clear and translucent round bead was clamped between two of his fingers, and then all his fingers started to dance, causing the bead to tumble freely amidst the 5 fingers. It started out slow, but the speed gradually became faster and faster. In the end, Ling Lan, who took pride in her eyesight, couldn't even see a shadow of the bead anymore. Ling Zhao's fingers had become mere afterimages in the air, so quick that she couldn't even tell which finger was which. Just as Ling Lan was staring as if in a trance, Ling Zhao suddenly folded his fingers to make a fist. The abrupt shift from movement to stillness disoriented Ling Lan's eyes, making them ache, extremely uncomfortable. "Your vision hasn't reached the level of my hand speed, which is why you feel the strain. Close your eyes and rest for a bit." Ling Lan did as Ling Zhao said, and soon found that her eyes no longer felt stretched and achy. Only then did she open her eyes again. "That's where the limit of your eyesight is. You feel it now. From now on, you must train your hand speed. At the same time, you must get your vision up to the level of your hand speed. This requires slow and steady training. There is no shortcut," said Ling Zhao to Ling Lan. Legacy missions weren't as miraculous as most people thought. There is no way for someone to ascend to the heavens in one step. To succeed, it all still depended on your own effort to earn it. The legacy mission would only show you how to do so more efficiently, that's all. "I understand." Ling Lan nodded, heart filled with gratitude for Ling Zhao's mentoring. As he trained her hand speed and vision, Ling Zhao had indirectly been telling Ling Lan that, to become strong, she needed to rely on her own efforts. No one else could do it for her. "Just now, was that already your fastest speed?" Ling Lan, who was in a great mood, finally displayed the curiosity a 7-year-old child should have. Ling Zhao only smiled silently, but spread out his fingers once more. In his palm was no longer just the one crystal bead from before, but a whole 9 beads. Ling Lan found herself tongue-tied with astonishment. Before she could find her voice to ask, Ling Zhao's fingers started moving once more. The 9 crystal beads collided with each other within his palm, emitting clear and reverberating bell-like sounds. As they collided with one another, the beads started bouncing irregularly. This was the hardest thing to control, because you had to predict where each bead would go. Ling Lan was sure she could control 1 bead with no pressure, 2 if the speed wasn't too fast, but 3 would be tricky. However, Ling Zhao easily controlled all 9 beads, his fingers flying swiftly to block every single one before they could fall, only allowing them to roll around in his palm. Gradually, Ling Zhao's speed became faster and faster, until finally, the sounds of the beads colliding meshed into one solid sound, no gaps between collisions. At this point, Ling Lan could no longer see what was going on in Ling Zhao's hand. Everything was just a blur. Ling Lan thought that this was already the limit, but unexpectedly, something even more astonishing happened. Gradually, Ling Lan couldn't even see the blur of shadows anymore. It was as if Ling Zhao had spread open his palm like a lotus flower, but there was no sign of those beads within it. Ling Lan knew this was a false impression. Ling Zhao's speed had just reached a frightening level, enough to fool the eyes into registering this illusion, defaulting back into the original setting. This was a misperception, an illusion born of sheer overwhelming speed. Before Ling Lan could regain her senses, she heard several consecutive clacking noises, 9 in total. Following these sounds, Ling Zhao abruptly stopped the motions of his fingers. At this moment, Ling Lan felt a throbbing pain in her eyes, and tears began to spill over from them in a flood. They had been working too hard to try and see a speed too far beyond their limits, and had finally incurred the backlash. It took a while, but Ling Lan finally felt comfortable again. She opened her eyes and saw Ling Zhao standing before her with a smile, his right hand in a loose fist. "I'm all right now," said Ling Lan embarrassedly. She focused her attention on Ling Zhao's right hand. Ling Zhao slowly opened his right palm. In the middle of his palm, the initially solid crystal beads had been turned into a heap of powder. Ling Zhao shook his fingers lightly, and the fine powder scattered, sifting through his fingers to drift slowly to the ground. Under the refraction of the light, the crystal powder sparkled, sending out countless glimmering rays, immersing the two of them in an illusion of a magical realm. Chapter 107. Transported to the capital. Ling Lan wasn't bedazzled by this magical scene. Her expression changed slightly in awareness. Although Ling Lan hadn't been able to see what was going on in Ling Zhao's palm earlier, she could tell that Ling Zhao's fingers hadn't been exerting much pressure. He had just simply been blocking the paths of those crystal beads to prevent them from falling off his palm. But it was precisely this sort of forceless pressure that, under the workings of extreme speed, had shattered the crystal beads from the inside out. It was clear to see just how much destructive power it had. "Looks like you've understood." Ling Zhao was very pleased with Ling Lan's reaction. He had thought that he would have to explain in further detail, but unexpectedly, Ling Lan had actually grasped the deeper meaning already. "Yep, when anything reaches a certain limit, a great energy will be created," said Ling Lan carefully, summarizing her thoughts. Ling Lan was very excited internally, because she had finally met someone she could discuss these things with. In the learning space, her instructors only let her feel things out for herself, never ever telling her much about Dao, causing Ling Lan to feel extremely lost. "That's right. I didn't expect you to notice that point. I call it Shi-Wan, and there isn't just one type of Shi, but many. However, Ling Lan, you must remember not to bite off more than you can chew. More Shi is not always better." Ling Zhao glanced coolly at Ling Lan, rapidly cooling down her initially bubbling excitement. Ling Zhao's reminder caused Ling Lan to become thoughtful. After that, Ling Zhao didn't let Ling Lan remain for long in the mission space. He only told her that in future, she could access this place directly to find him by using his spirit crystal, with no need to take the test again. Then, Ling Lan was immediately sent back to the login point of the Academy's virtual world. "You finally appeared, boss." When Little Four saw Ling Lan, he burst out in tears and pounced on her, clearly upset. Ling Lan reflexively caught hold of Little Four, and cautioned him saying, "You coming out like this, won't it be suspicious?" Little Four sniffled, "It's no problem, boss. This is a special space I created. We can see outside, but they can't see us." "Right, in the mission space. Why did you become silent after I arrived at the Ling family mansion?" Ling Lan had thought it strange. If she hadn't been afraid that her dad wouldn't acknowledge it, she would really have liked to just let Little Four open the safe directly. She had originally thought that Little Four would jump out straight away to critique her dad's pedantry, but Little Four had been surprisingly silent and non-reactive. Back then, she had been too caught up with the mission, so although Ling Lan was puzzled, she didn't have the mind to go ask Little Four about it. But now, Ling Lan's curiosity was back. Ling Lan's words caused Little Four to recall his misery, and he started crying once more. Under Ling Lan's consolation, he managed to tell her the reason in between sobs. Apparently, when Ling Lan had entered the study and seen Ling Zhao's smiling face, what greeted Little Four had instead been Ling Zhao's sharp and cold gaze. That piercing gaze had scrambled Little Four's operations, kicking him right out of the legacy space. This was also the reason why Little Four had been unresponsive. He had been kicked out by Ling Zhao at that point. Ling Lan frowned, a little worried. Did this mean that anyone with strong spiritual strength would be able to discover Little Four's existence? Little Four sensed Ling Lan's anxiety for him, and his courtship actually started to heat up. However, this heat was warm and very comfortable, cheering him up immensely. He said then to Ling Lan, "Boss, don't worry. I've met other people before with great mental and spiritual energy, but they never noticed me. Perhaps it was because I entered your dad's legacy space, which is equivalent to entering his spiritual self. That's why he noticed me." "Yup, what you say makes sense. Still, please be careful after this. Don't simply go into other people's spiritual self. Let's avoid the risk." Ling Lan felt that what Little Four said made sense, but still cautioned Little Four to be more careful in the virtual world from now on. He shouldn't get too caught up in thinking he was a god. The two of them talked for a little bit longer. During this time, Little Four was multitasking. He was also controlling the fake Ling Lan he had created to walk out of the library and slowly make its way to the login point. Then, he made the fake Ling Lan go through the motions of logging out. Due to expending so much brain power during the legacy mission, Ling Lan was somewhat fatigued, so she logged out of the virtual world together with Little Four and went off to take a good long rest. Meanwhile, due to Little Four's thorough arrangements, neither the monitoring military nor the other students entering for the test noticed that Ling Lan had already sneakily obtained Ling Zhao's legacy. To create the false impression that the legacy mission was still uncracked, Little Four left the virtual pocket testing space up until one day it disappeared along with Ling Zhao's legacy mission, throwing the military into disarray, unable to figure out what had happened. After Ling Lan received her father's legacy, she began practicing the bead exercise every day with both hands at the same time. Of course, Ling Lan did not practice with those precious crystal beads, but with sturdy steel beads instead. Qilong and the others, who had been hanging out with Ling Lan all this while, saw Ling Lan forever carrying around 2 steel beads to fiddle with, and was overcome with curiosity. So they asked Ling Lan why she was doing so. Ling Lan felt that this was not any special training method that she needed to keep secret. Ling Zhao himself had said before that this was just a small technique to train up hand speed. The key was whether one had enough determination to keep working on it without giving up. Thus, she generously told them what she was doing, and explained what benefits the training would bring. When Qilong and the others heard this, they immediately had stars in their eyes. Hand speed had always been a troublesome issue for fighters and mecha operators, even though the Federation had also tried to develop some training methods to increase hand speed. The effectiveness of those methods was limited, yielding only slight improvements. The moment one hit a bottleneck, there would be no more effect from then onwards. The others in the group rushed to follow Ling Lan and train together, and so a trend swept through the Central Scout Academy. Several bored students of the second grade Class A, no matter if they were reading, eating, or chatting, would always be seen fiddling with a small steel bead in their hands, rolling it round and round in their palms. Just like that, they trained steadily for several months, and Ling Lan abruptly found that she had not experienced any improvement in an entire month. Every night, using 3 steel beads simultaneously, her training would break down at the 3.0127-minute mark. For a whole month she struggled and hovered on this time frame, and Ling Lan just knew that she had encountered her first bottleneck. Ling Lan really wanted to break through this bottleneck, so she specially increased the practice time for hand speed. But the more impatient she was, the worse the effect. Ling Lan found that after several consecutive days of forceful extended training, her hand speed actually deteriorated to a certain degree instead. She knew then that she couldn't continue this sort of self-punishing training anymore, otherwise, not only would there be no effect, she may even cause some unnecessary problem to appear in her 2 hands. Ling Lan decided to rest well for a bit. Besides the missions from the learning space which had never stopped, whether it was in reality or within the virtual world, Ling Lan chose to stop everything. Her typically busy life abruptly became free, causing her to feel a little out of sorts. Seeing his boss's clear discomfort, Little Four thought of a good way to kill time and relax at the same time. He prepared an adult appearance for Ling Lan to use in the virtual network so that she could go explore the virtual world outside and expand her horizons. Little Four's suggestion touched Ling Lan deeply. After all, she had never been to the real virtual world. The virtual world of the Central Scout Academy, at the end of the day, was just a platform for the students to familiarize themselves with the virtual world. Immediate action is better than anticipation. That very afternoon, Ling Lan made Little Four get everything ready, and then she logged into the virtual world, prepared for her first foray into the outside world. Ling Lan entered the login point. It was still the same hall she had first logged into, no changes whatsoever. At first, Ling Lan thought Little Four had forgotten about modifying her appearance, so she said moodily, "Little Four, why didn't you help to change my appearance?" Sigh. A kid was still a kid after all, easily dropping the ball at crucial moments. Speechless, Little Four made a floor-length mirror appear in front of Ling Lan, presenting Ling Lan's current appearance to her. He, giggled Ling Lan in embarrassment. It turned out that Ling Lan's appearance had already been changed. When Ling Lan had logged in, Little Four had immediately modified her brainwaves, helping her into her virtual disguise instantaneously. Ling Lan's current form was that of a girl around 16 years old, in the flower of her youth. Her looks bore some resemblance to the Ling Lan of her last life, with a steam bun face too and a pair of big lively eyes, extremely alert and adorable. This appearance. Isn't it just too kawaii? 3? She looked like a total loli 4. Ling Lan felt a little awkward. To be honest, she had already gotten used to her Shota 5 face of this life that leaned more towards the boyish side. This way, no one will ever suspect that you're Ling Lan. Little Four was perplexed. He had gone to so much effort to create a human appearance that was completely different from the current Ling Lan. Why would boss have any complaints? That's true. Ling Lan finally got with the program. If they had fashioned an appearance that had similar qualities to her current self, though the probability of being discovered was still very low, there was always the slight chance she would be discovered. Little Four had really considered everything very thoroughly. Ling Lan didn't hold back her admiration, showering Little Four generously with praise, sending Little Four straight into a happy daze. When he heard Ling Lan request to go to the capital, still hazy with pleasure, Little Four didn't look at the name of the planet, choosing a capital quickly and beginning their transportation. Cough cough. Who asked every planet to have a capital? Little Four had just sent Ling Lan off when he noticed the problem. However, Little Four didn't dare to say anything. He had just received Ling Lan's praise. If he revealed his mistake now, wouldn't that just be slapping himself in the face? Besides, Planet Azure's capital was still a capital. His boss hadn't really specified that she wanted to go to the capital of planet Doha. At this point, Ling Lan had no idea that her current position was already no longer on the planet of Doha where she lived. Instead, she was now on planet Azure, a planet on the fringes of the Federation several hundred thousands of light years away. Ling Lan stood at the transfer point, looking around in shock and surprise at the vintage scene before her. She could almost believe that she had returned to the olden times. I thought that the capital should be even more advanced and futuristic than the city we live in. Who knew it'd be this traditional? Every city's setting is different. The capitals here all have more traditional settings. Little Four secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. At least that excuse had sounded somewhat plausible. Chapter 108. A dangerous man. That's true. But compared to a modern science fiction type setting, I like this better. Ling Lan smiled. The familiar architecture and the familiar surroundings made her feel at ease instantly, sweeping away the tiredness that had been accumulated over several months of high-intensity training. When Little Four heard that Ling Lan liked it here, all his nerves and anxiety fled. Now wasn't this just a fortuitous mistake? Thinking of this, Little Four started to become a little smug. As I thought, I'm really the smartest intelligent bioentity. Even when I make a mistake, I make it in such a perfect way. Leaving Little Four's private celebration aside, Ling Lan brought Little Four along as she toured the entire capital city. Of course, she was only window shopping. For one, this identity didn't have a corresponding central bank account, and so had no way to pay with credits. Although Little Four could have found a way to handle it, Ling Lan was of the mind that they should avoid doing unnecessary things to avoid trouble. Most importantly, she was afraid that the central bank would run scans at irregular intervals. If anything was exposed, it would be troublesome for both her and Little Four. Secondly, this identity also didn't have any safe dummy mailing address. Was she supposed to get the stores to deliver anything she bought to the Ling family estates? Then what would be the point of going to the trouble of making this fake identity? Ling Lan was just like an imprisoned bird which had been set free. She was full of enthusiasm no matter what she saw. Being able to freely walk the streets and browse was fulfilling a dream of hers which spanned both her lives. In her previous life, she had always been confined to her sickbed. She dreamed every day of having the chance to go out and explore the streets, but unfortunately, till the end, that dream had never been realized. And then, since she had been born in this world, she had always been restricted to her home. And after that, she became restricted to the Scout Academy. Although the virtual world of the Scout Academy also had shops, the items they offered were extremely monotonous, all having something to do with learning. Furthermore, the shops were all too science fiction-y, so Ling Lan just couldn't experience any of the enjoyment of regular shopping there. However, this capital was completely different. The classical buildings, as well as the decorations of the stores, were all very similar to that of the stores in her previous life, giving her the satisfying feeling of flattening a road one. Her mood was endlessly buoyant. If it weren't for the fact that every time she entered a store introduction would pop up right before her eyes, Ling Lan might have believed that she was actually browsing a real street. The capital truly lived up to its status as the capital, whether it was in terms of fashion, food, activity, or accommodation. The sheer variety was dazzling. Just as Ling Lan was engrossed in her sightseeing, the people around her, who had also been busy with their shopping, suddenly stopped walking, as if receiving some unknown signal. On their faces were expressions of excitement. Some of them even yelled out involuntarily. Very quickly, they changed their personal plans, all of them heading mutually towards the same direction. What's going on? Ling Lan was a little bewildered by this, and hurried to ask Little Four. Without delay, Little Four immediately began a search. Then, with a surprised expression, he said, "There's actually a mecha combat tournament happening here, and it's a cross-level J6 challenge against a J8. Can this be real?" Ling Lan, who knew almost nothing about the world outside in this life, said dumbly, "J6, J8? What's that?" Little Four slapped his forehead. Only now did he remember that he had forgotten to supplement Ling Lan's knowledge on this front. So, He quickly gave a general overview of what mecha combat tournaments were all about. In the virtual world, this mecha combat tournament was actually a type of combat game that was open to all members of the public. Any citizen could participate in the combat game as long as they were 13 years old and above. Meanwhile, the students of the Scout Academy could get rid of the seal of the Scout Academy once they turned 13, and enter the real virtual world. In other words, if they followed the normal schedule, Ling Lan would only be able to come here after she turned 13. Regardless of age, any newbie who just started the game would be at level J0. They needed to learn how to operate mecha and go through related combat training before unlocking the newbie arena. After earning 100 points, they would successfully move forward into level J1, and after accumulating 1000 points, they'd enter level J2. Calculating forwards from this, you can just imagine what an astronomical number of points was needed to achieve level J9. Little Four told Ling Lan that very few mecha operators managed to advance to level J9. Of the billions of people in the entire Federation, there were only about 3,000 to 4,000 people who had done it. Of course, there is also a level higher than J9, but those people who could achieve it would not bother with this sort of mecha combat game for the masses. Little Four didn't elaborate much on that, for he felt that these things were still a little too far off for Ling Lan to worry about. It's lucky then that cross-level challenges are allowed. Otherwise, going according to the regular flow, slowly accumulating points bit by bit, who knows how many months and years it would take to enter J9. Ling Lan felt a little dizzy just looking at the countless number of zeros behind that extrapolated number. It's allowed, but the conditions for a cross-level challenge is very strict. If a challenger fails, the punishment may make the person regret it so much that they'd kill themselves, said Little Four in a flat tone. Advantages are not so easily obtained. For a cross-level challenge, winning one fight isn't enough. You would have to consecutively defeat 3 randomly selected high-level opponents over the course of 3 days before your cross-level challenge is considered successful. Only then will you really enter the ranks of that level. But if you lose, the point deduction is extremely harsh. Take that J6 for example. He might very likely lose so many marks that he would fall directly back to level J3. Maybe even J2. Little Four explained the rules and punishment related to this cross-level challenge. Well, it still seems worth it. Even if he falls down to J2 or J3, he can just challenge a J7 or J8 next time. As long as he can manage 3 wins sometime, won't he be right back up? Said Ling Lan, disagreeing. How could it be that easy? Each person only has 3 chances to initiate a cross-level challenge every year, unless he wins all 3 times. Otherwise, if he loses just once, he would have to start over and accumulate points again. As everyone knows, points are extremely hard to collect in the mecha combat tournaments. It requires a lot of time and matches. More importantly, the so-called cross-level challenges are actually just a cross-1-level challenge. A J2 can only challenge a J4, a J3 can only challenge a J5. So even if he waits a whole year, he still wouldn't be able to return to his original position. Boss, do you still think this kind of cross-level challenge is worth it? Little Four's words stunned Ling Lan. So that's how it is. Then, isn't the cross-level challenge just for show? Probably very few people would choose to try a cross-level challenge, right? It looked like the creator of the game really hated people who took shortcuts, actually posing such imposing restrictions and obstacles. Of course, otherwise the people here wouldn't be so worked up over this current challenge. There might still be many cross-level challenges in the lower levels, but a high-level cross-level challenge is very rarely seen, especially this type of J6 versus J8 challenge. I've heard that you might not even see one within 100 years. Boss, you're really quite lucky. Little Four reported everything he had learned from his searches to Ling Lan, telling her that this upcoming mecha fight was really very uncommon. Then let's go take a look. Ling Lan's interest was thoroughly piqued by Little Four. They moved along with the crowd towards their destination, a 7-story tall pagoda. Drats, we need to buy tickets. Ling Lan was about to walk through the entrance when a line of text suddenly appeared before her. Her mood fell. Apparently tickets were required to enter. This was also the first time Little Four was entering a battle stadium to watch a mecha fight, so he hadn't known they had needed tickets either. Hearing Ling Lan's words, he said, "Wait one moment," and disappeared. Ling Lan thought that Little Four would be away for some time, but surprisingly, it had only been a few seconds when Little Four returned. He made a victory pose with his hands and said smugly, "Boss, everything's settled." As Little Four was speaking, another person completely covered up in a black windbreaker was just about to buy the ticket number he was interested in when a notification popped up on his communicator. "Sorry, the ticket number you've selected is no longer available. Please make a new selection." Weird. Someone was actually faster than me? "It's been taken," muttered the person to himself. He had no choice but to choose the seat right next to the one he had wanted. Seeing the words "purchase successful" appear, he closed his communicator and walked into the battle stadium. At this moment, Little Four was extremely pleased with himself. He had finally gotten the chance to show off his skills as an omnipotent underling in front of Ling Lan. For a godlike existence like him, sneaking Ling Lan in without a ticket was nothing. No, Little Four was an obedient babe. He would never do this sort of underhanded thing. He was just doing a favor. Yep, doing a favor by showing up to watch. Receiving Little Four's confirmation, Ling Lan walked towards the entrance of the battle stadium once more. This time, the words that appeared before her was no longer a reminder to buy a ticket. Instead, the words were a welcome. "Thank you for your patronage. Your seat number is 20, section 20, row 20 number." Ling Lan sighed in wonder yet again. Little Four was truly very useful. Whether it was in the real world or in the virtual world, she just couldn't get by without Little Four's help. Ling Lan stepped through the gates and felt the scenery twist before eyes. And then, she found herself standing at the entrance to a random passage. Rows and rows of seats before her. "Could you please give way?" An icy voice rang out from behind Ling Lan. She quickly turned and saw a man in a windbreaker standing there. What surprised Ling Lan was that the man's face was almost wrapped up completely by the large hood of the windbreaker. Only his lower jaw and slightly corked thin lips could be seen from within its shadow. Sorry." Ling Lan ducked her head apologetically, and hurried to give way. Her head lowered. Ling Lan did not let the other discover her shock. She clenched her fists tightly, annoyed at herself for being careless. Just now, Ling Lan actually hadn't sensed the presence of anyone behind her. This was the first time someone had been able to get close to her without her noticing. If the other had had any bad intentions and ambushed her, she would definitely have been co-ed directly and become deader than dead. And when she had faced the man, a pressing sense of danger had risen from her heart. This was the first time she could actually feel danger emanating from a person's body. The man did not say anything, only nodding at Ling Lan lightly to signify thanks before moving past Ling Lan. It looked like he was also an audience member who had come to watch the match. Ling Lan did not follow after him right away. She was still a little wary of that man, and decided that it would be a better idea to keep some distance from him. The man finally walked off into the distance, far enough that Ling Lan could no longer see his silhouette. Then, she heard Little Four say, "Oh crap, that fellow is a hacker. No, he's very likely one of those rumored specters." Little Four, by specter, do you mean those beings capable of wiping out a person's consciousness in the virtual world? Of course, the aura of that person is very similar. It's a type of spiritual mutation that belongs to a specter hacker, confirmed Little Four. Even within the virtual world, Ling Lan could feel cold sweat breaking out on her forehead at these words. No wonder she had sensed so much danger from the man. It turned out that he was a being who could kill someone without a trace. Boo-hoo-hoo, this virtual world was really very dangerous. Even if Ling Lan could kill a person like this 100,000 times over in real life, in the virtual world, she still needed to give these people a wide berth. Chapter 109, God View. "Boss, do you want to know that person's real identity? I can go find out." Little Four's eyes were sparkling, as if he had found some great new toy. Ling Lan was just about to agree when she suddenly grew cautious and asked, "How are you planning to find out?" Little Four said excitedly, Of course, by infiltrating the other's spiritual self. Then I'll be able to see the other's true identity. Not allowed, barked Ling Lan fiercely inside the mind space. Ling Lan had not forgotten about what had happened within her dad's mission space. Little Four had said then that a strong person's spiritual self would be able to discover him, and may even take control of Little Four to harm him. Who knew if this hacker-evolved Spectre would be able to cause some catastrophic damage to Little Four? Why? Little Four was taken aback by Ling Lan's sharp rebuke. Mind you, even when Ling Lan had been applying domestic violence in the past, she had never before treated him so sternly. That scary expression and tone of voice didn't just shock Little Four but also hurt him. He wilted, a depressed expression on his face. He started to wonder if Ling Lan didn't like him anymore, treating him this way. First off, we have no conflict with him. Why poke a sleeping tiger? If we anger him, and he decides to come after us, we'll be in a lot of trouble. Little Four was just about to say that he wasn't at all afraid of that, because he could handle everything just fine, but Ling Lan pressed down on his little shoulder at that moment. She said earnestly, most importantly, I don't want you, Little Four, to be in danger. If anything happened to you, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So, Little Four, you must promise me. You must protect yourself well, so that you can stay by my side forever and ever, until the day I leave this world. Hearing this little speech by Ling Lan, all of Little Four's sadness and resentment disappeared. He felt as if his CPU was overloaded. Not just that, his core chip was starting to heat up, becoming hotter and hotter, almost reaching critical levels. He should have been frantic and panicked, and tried to find a way to cool his core chip down rapidly. But, goddammit, he just didn't want to. He even felt that the existence of this heat was truly wondrous. He loved this feeling so much he could die. Ling Lan saw Little Four's slack and unresponsive face and was afraid he hadn't understood what she had been trying to say. So, with emphasis, she repeated again, Little Four, listen, I forbid you from going off on your own from now on to investigate the spiritual selves of anyone strong or dangerous. As long as the other leaves us alone, we'll leave them alone too. Remember, you must protect yourself. Didn't you want to be my #1 follower? If you don't listen to me, I'll take away your precious #1 follower position. Ling Lan decided that a threat was necessary along with the warning to show just how serious she was about this. At this point, Little Four had already lost all ability to think, but that grand goal of being the #1 follower had always been a top priority in his heart, so when he heard Ling Lan's warning threat, he hurriedly nodded obediently, giving up any thought of checking out that man. He could lose anything else, but that #1 follower position must not be lost. This was Little Four's only major ambition ever since he had become aware. In that case, he would let that man go this time. Still, Little Four finally returned to normal. His CPU was no longer running on overdrive, and his chip was no longer in danger of shorting. He looked towards the direction where the man had vanished and fiercely swung his fist into the air. He was determined to not let that man hurt his boss. Otherwise, even if he had to go against his boss's words, he would still give that man a piece of his mind. After obtaining Little Four's promise, Ling Lan could finally relax. She waited for a few minutes, then slowly made her way to the designated eating area at the front to look for her seat. It should be said that looking for a seat in the virtual world was extremely easy. The moment she entered the seating area, a chart of the seating layout automatically appeared before her eyes. A red light was blinking on one of the seats on the chart, while a green dot was gradually moving forwards. Yup, that green dot was herself. Very quickly, Ling Lan had followed the chart to find her seat. Once she sat down, the chart before her eyes disappeared, and she regained her usual vision. Ling Lan looked around curiously at the audience around her. A familiar outfit caught her eye, rendering her speechless instantly, curse words pouring out in a torrent inside her mind. Why was she so unlucky, actually meeting up once again with this dangerous fellow? It turned out that Ling Lan's neighboring seat was occupied by that dangerous man with a mutating mentality who was evolving into a specter. However, the man's attitude was not bad. When he saw Ling Lan approaching, He nodded slightly in greeting. Hello." Ling Lan squeezed out a weak smile before turning away moodily. Even so, Ling Lan wasn't really all that scared inside. Although the other was very dangerous, the two of them were just passing strangers with no bad blood between them. It was unlikely that the other would harm her for no reason. Furthermore, although Ling Lan had forbidden Little Four from exploring, she knew that if the other tried to do something bad to her, Little Four would definitely counterattack and protect her from getting injured. In addition, Ling Lan was very confident in her own abilities. As long as she could hold off the other's sneak attack at the start, it wouldn't be that easy to harm her afterwards. She was mostly unrivaled within the Central Scout Academy. Although she was a little weaker within the virtual world, she wasn't so weak that she would be completely helpless against attack. In short, Ling Lan felt prepared no matter what happened. Just like that, Ling Lan regained her equilibrium once more and turned to coolly survey the battle stadium. The battle stadium was large, so large that it was rather frightening. It was a lot like an enlarged version of the basketball stadiums of her previous world, just that the rectangular court in the middle had been changed into a huge circular ring. On all sides were audience stands, packed tightly one level after another. Ling Lan carefully counted and found that there were actually as many as 12 levels from top to bottom. By her estimations, this stadium could hold up to 500,000 audience members. If compared to her previous world, this venue would definitely be considered one of the more massive stadiums. If this building existed in reality, what an enormous structure it would be. Ling Lan sighed. The architecture of the future was heading more and more towards massive sizes, it seemed. Currently, Ling Lan didn't know that this mecha battle stadium that she found so massive was actually just a small venue in this world. Planet Azure was a third-rate planet, so its capital was also considered a third-rate city. It could only have this sort of small mecha battle stadium. The capital of a second-rate planet would be able to possess a medium-sized stadium, which could hold 800,000 people. Meanwhile, a first-rate planet could have a large stadium, which could hold 10 million people. As for the capitals of capital planets like Doha, they could have giant stadiums. These stadiums could hold up to 20 million people. Now that's what you would really call an enormous structure. All we can say is that the current Ling Lan was really a country bumpkin, having seen very little of the real world thus far. It wasn't long before the entire stadium was filled with people, a crowd of heads all packed together. Soon, the sound of a bell rang out beside their ears. The sound of this bell was very melodious, sounding more like the tinkling of water than a metal bell. Following this sound, warm applause broke out across the whole stadium. At the same time, two mechas slowly descended from the skies, making their way down slowly to land on the ground. One of the mecha was entirely red while the other was a sheet of silver. When Ling Lan focused on any one of the mecha, the image before her eyes would reveal that mecha's basic information. From this, Ling Lan found out that the red mecha was the J6 Challenger, while the silver mecha was the J8 recipient of the challenge. The two mecha belonged to two different categories of mecha. The red mecha was a wing transformer type mecha. Its advantage was optimum flexibility in the air, and it could switch freely between a humanoid shape and a pure aviation model, considered a mecha suited for both land and air. Its right arm was equipped with a beam gun, while its left hand was left empty for general use. The sides of its two legs each held one high-alloy dagger, and below its wings were several high-efficiency guided missiles. Of course, this was just standard regulation equipment. As for whether there were any hidden secret weapons, no one could tell. Concealed weaponry was also a type of strategy in these mecha combat fights, so all mecha would typically have something up their sleeves. Meanwhile, the silver mecha was a land-based humanoid mecha, extremely agile on land. On its back was a radiation gun, which was a specialized anti-aircraft weapon. In the mecha's right hand was a beam saber and its left hand was similarly empty on standby. All its other equipment were just like the red mecha's, standard regulation weapons. The two mecha faced each other from a distance, both moving their limbs as they liked. They seemed to be warming up. Right then, a strange scene suddenly occurred on the match grounds, causing Ling Lan to yell out in surprise. On the field, The scenery suddenly changed. The normal floorboards swiftly turned into an endless desert. The audience was also whisked away from the stadium into the middle of this desert. Ling Lan could even feel the scorching heat of the sun on her body, as well as the limitless heat reflected by the sand beneath her feet. Ling Lan quickly understood that this must be a type of simulation method, creating a realistic desert environment in an instant. Ling Lan still hadn't shaken herself out of the shock of finding herself in a desert when she was blindsided again. Apparently, the Red-Wing Transformer mecha had switched into aviation mode while the background was changing into this desert. Now, it was zooming off into the distance, directly becoming a small black dot before disappearing from sight completely. The silver mecha was equally fast, with a few great bounds. It had also disappeared into the dunes in the distance. How was she supposed to watch the match if she couldn't see the mecha? She asked Little Four, but Little Four was just as clueless. He quickly rushed to search for a solution, but just then, a cold voice abruptly rang out from beside her, almost scaring Ling Lan witless. First time watching a match? Ling Lan turned her head. Sure enough, it was the mysterious man with his hidden eyes, ears, and nose who had spoken. Ling Lan was a little startled. She had obviously sensed that the other was very cold, so why would he take the initiative to speak to her? Still, Ling Lan wasn't so foolish as to refuse someone who was willing to help. Yes, it's my first time watching this kind of match. Focus and say selection in your mind. A menu will appear, the man instructed Ling Lan. Ling Lan did as he said, and a line of text appeared before her eyes. Please choose the viewing angle you want. 1. God view. 2. Challenger view. 3. Defender view. Ling Lan didn't know which viewing angle was better, and so decided it would be wiser to ask an old hand at this. Thus, she unreservedly asked the man beside her, which viewing angle should I choose? If you want to see an exciting match, choose God view. If you want to know how to operate a mecha or ways to counter, you can choose the other two options. The man was not as aloof and hard to get along with as Ling Lan had feared. He patiently responded to Ling Lan's question. Ling Lan thought for a moment. She did not know how to operate mecha at all, so it would be a waste to watch from the other two perspectives. She might as well watch the two mechas fight. Perhaps it would spark some inspiration for her own combat skills. Thus, she decisively chose God view. Thanks. Before making her selection, Ling Lan politely thanked the man beside her. Chapter 110, Hide and Seek. After giving her thanks, Ling Lan no longer paid any attention to the man or his response. All her focus was now on the mecha combat match about to begin. This caused the man beside her to throw a speechless glance at her. Well, that was rather perfunctory. Shouldn't she be more sincere when thanking someone? Ling Lan was oblivious to the internal grumbles of the man beside her. After choosing God view, the image before her eyes shifted instantly, revealing two very different images. One image was focused on the red mecha, while the other showed that the silver mecha had already hidden itself underneath one of the sand dunes. The color of the mecha was gradually changing to match the color of the dune. Ling Lan found this rather interesting, and put her attention on the silver mecha's image, silently saying in her mind to zoom out. Unthinkingly, she had stumbled upon the correct controls. The image zoomed out, showing that the hiding place of the silver mecha was completely invisible from a high bird's eye view. Using the same method again, Ling Lan zoomed out the image of the red mecha as well. Only then did she find out that the red mecha was actually not that far away from the silver mecha. It was just that the red mecha had been circling around without getting close to the other's hiding spot. Now, the whereabouts of both mecha had been observed. On the lower left corner of the image, there was a number counting down. Ling Lan guessed that this was probably the official start time of the match. The number was now already at 73, so the match would probably start about a minute or so later. Moreover, Ling Lan also noticed that after she chose a viewing angle, it was as if she had entered a separate space. She couldn't feel the presence of anyone around her. It was as if she was the only one watching this battle. All disturbances screened away. Ling Lan was comfortable with this. At least that man with the dangerous presence would not be able to disrupt her from enjoying the mecha fight. Meanwhile, On Little Four's end, not only did he search out all kinds of control systems for mecha fighting games, he also looted all the information about other control systems that could be found within the virtual world. After he returned from his pillaging, Little Four told Ling Lan that this kind of low-level mistake would never happen ever again. Little Four's mood was actually terrible right then. He had never expected that the virtual world would have a game directly implanted inside it, and that every game would have different control systems. This threw him, a virtual god, for a loop, causing him to lose face greatly in front of his boss this time. He still remembered how he had proudly proclaimed himself as the god of the virtual world to his boss once. Who could have expected that there were things a god didn't know? It was such a slap in the face. Ling Lan had no idea Little Four was tying himself up in knots over this. Right now, she was patiently waiting for the countdown to reach 0. Finally, when the clock displayed a string of zeros, the initially circling red mecha abruptly changed directions and flew straight towards the silver mecha's hiding spot. Ling Lan supposed that it was very likely that, to avoid wasting time with hide-and-seek, the system had directly informed the red mecha of its opponent's general position. Ling Lan believed that, for fairness' sake, the system wouldn't give specific coordinates on the other's location to either side. Sure enough, the red mecha's subsequent actions proved this point. In the air, while still about 5 kilometers away from the silver mecha's position, the red mecha suddenly launched a guided missile. The moment the missile was fired, Ling Lan felt ripples pass through the image. Little Four jumped in with an immediate explanation. This is an IMP-1 missile. It can disrupt the radar scanning of a mecha. It looked like in order to make the audience feel the scene better, the system had added in these visual effects to represent these originally invisible interactions. What is the furthest distance that a mecha's radar scanning can reach? Asked Ling Lan thoughtfully. Depends on the mecha's radar model. A common mecha will typically be able to scan up to 2,000 meters, an intermediate mecha up to 2,500 meters, and an advanced mecha up to 3,000 meters. Of course, there's still special class mecha which can scan up to 4,000 meters. Could the silver mecha be a special class mecha? At J8 level, it's very likely to possess a special class mecha. But for a special class mecha, not only must the mecha operator's operational skill be up to level, the operator must also have gathered a certain amount of meritorious exploits, explained Little Four to Ling Lan as he browsed through the information he had found. Ling Lan nodded. Now she understood why the red mecha had fired the NUMP missile from 5 kilometers away. It was probably afraid the opponent was a special class mecha, whose radar was capable of sensing 1,000 meters further than his own mecha. It was a reality that the red mecha couldn't afford to lose, so he couldn't gamble on this possibility. The red mecha had just fired the NIMP missile when it transformed into humanoid shape in midair and slowly descended to land on the ground. Next, the red mecha's color slowly faded to match the color of the desert. This is the chameleon system only equipped on advanced mecha and beyond. It allows a mecha's external color to change according to its environment. Little Four continued to clarify things for Ling Lan. Originally, all this information would be taught to Ling Lan in the Scout Academy before she turned 13. However, since Little Four had let Ling Lan come into contact with the virtual world and mecha fights prematurely, Little Four had no choice but to become the transmitter of knowledge. A ring-shaped object slowly emerged from the shoulder area of the red mecha which had turned into the color of the desert. Then, the object slowly and carefully snuck towards the position of the silver mecha. The ring-shaped object is an E-Type 2 heat detector, the newest model on the market. It's considered a type of retrofit, not an original component of mecha. This model of heat detector can sense heat up to a distance of 1,500 meters. Little Four was quick to react, introducing this new item that had appeared to Ling Lan immediately. Ling Lan nodded silently. Even if the K8 mecha also had an E-type heat detector equipped, the red mecha would not be disadvantaged. The two mechas had initially been set apart greatly by their long-range sensing capabilities. But with this move by the red mecha, the playing field had been leveled. Of course, if the other side didn't have the newest heat detector equipped, this move would have given the red mecha the upper hand. A well-timed and well-used NIMP missile, It looked like the red mecha had come fully prepared for this cross-level challenge. It hadn't issued the challenge recklessly, and had come armed with meticulous strategy and tactics to handle the J8. It seemed like this match wouldn't be a quick one-sided battle. If the J8 wasn't careful, an upset might really be possible. Ling Lan felt her enthusiasm surge. Ling Lan wanted to know how the silver mecha would react after facing the loss of its radar. She turned her attention to the silver mecha's side and was promptly shocked still by the other's decision. Apparently, when the silver mecha had seen its radar fizzle out, it had stopped to think. After about 1 minute, the operator chose to submerge the mecha's entire body into the sand dune and shut down the mecha. The scene truly became deathly silent. This action naturally stunned Ling Lan. Even though Ling Lan didn't know much about mecha, she still knew that shutting down a mecha would also remove the defensive shield originally shielding the outside of the mecha. In other words, the defensive ability of the mecha currently would depend solely on the strength of the metal it was made of. If it was coincidentally shot by the opponent's laser gun, it would definitely take heavy damage. Ling Lan knew very well that doing this on the battlefield was pretty much a suicidal act. However, in this one-on-one fight, it worked wonders. This move by the J8 mecha made the J6 mecha's heat detector become utterly useless. In other words, the J8's choice leveled the playing field once again. To discover the other, they could rely on nothing else but their eyes. No external force or gadget could be borrowed. At this point, Ling Lan thought of another question. The mecha is inactivated, losing its defenses. Our human bodies naturally produce heat. Won't that be picked up by the heat detector? Little Four answered, because the protective clothing that mecha operators wear have heat shielding properties, so the heat detector won't be able to pick up their body heat. Ling Lan understood now. No wonder the J8 mecha had chosen to shut down without any hesitation. He had this to fall back on. The J6 mecha, which had already changed color to merge with the desert sand, began to walk across the desert. Ling Lan thought that the weight of the mecha itself would make it very difficult for the mecha to move, but unexpectedly, the mecha walked on the sand as if it were normal flat ground. As if it took no extra effort whatsoever. She took a closer look at the mecha's feet, and found that only its sole would sink into the sand, as if its big and heavy body did not exist. Could it be that this virtual world wasn't able to simulate realistic effects? Ling Lan was doubtful. Little Four sensed Ling Lan's puzzlement, and hurried to clear it up. It's not like that. These mecha come with their own levitation system, which can decrease the mecha's body weight. Here, the J6 mecha is still not being operated to its maximum capabilities. If a top-notch mecha operator were controlling it, its feet wouldn't sink at all into the yellow sand. Now that would truly be a display of walking on firm ground. So that's how it was. Ling Lan felt as if she had become more knowledgeable. She found that things related to mecha couldn't be viewed through the lens of normal logic. Right now, her interest towards mecha was rising in a vertical line. The long-slumbering mecha dream of hers began to stir and flare up once more. God damn it, she really wished she owned a mecha right now. Ling Lan's heart throbbed with excitement and impatience. Boss, if you want mecha, please get over your fear of heights first, whined Little Four with a pout. The main reason he still hadn't given Ling Lan any sort of mecha training till now was that Ling Lan was still afraid of heights. Little Four's words caused even Ling Lan's thick-skinned face to turn red. Although her fear of heights had indeed gotten better under forceful training over this duration of time, she wasn't sure if she was really over it yet. And so, Ling Lan pretended not to have heard anything. Looking away from Little Four's accusative stare, she turned her attention back to the images before her. The red mecha carefully approached the silver mecha's position. However, all he knew was the other's general position and not the actual position, so when he found that the heat detector wasn't picking anything up, he stopped moving and began to consider what to do next. By now, the J6 mecha must have probably figured out that the heat detector was useless. The J6 mecha seemed to become a little nervous now. Ling Lan saw that, with every step he took, he would look around warily. After many close brushes, he finally got closer and closer to the sand dune that the J8 was hiding in. Who would discover the other first? The J8 was hidden within the sand dune, making it very difficult for the J6 to discover it. On the other hand, The J-8 had shut down his mecha, and was in a blinded state. Both sides were not able to see the other. Was this match destined to be a game of hide-and-seek from beginning to end? Chapter 111, Calling Me Big Brother? Right then, Ling Lan saw the J-8 mecha move. Some color suddenly appeared on the entirely gray mecha. This is emergency activation. Now it all depends on what mecha it is. The emergency activation time of special class mecha is between 4 to 7 seconds, while in advanced mechas is between 7 to 9 seconds. Little 4 also began to feel a bit nervous. This would determine which mecha would gain the initiative. For a heat detector to detect heat and relay its findings back to the mecha's cockpit, there would be a 2-second delay. From this point onwards, this mecha battle would become a match of fighting over time. To see which mecha could react faster, and which mecha operator could respond quicker. 2 seconds after the J-8 activated, the J-6 mecha found that a red heat spot had appeared on the screen connected to its heat detector. The J-6 mecha, whose back was to the red spot, spun on one leg to turn around swiftly, and aimed precisely at the coordinate position indicated by the flashing red dot. But there was nothing there. Even so, the J-6 mecha did not hesitate. It swiftly pressed down on the trigger of the laser beam gun in its hands. Energy from a clip of the gun's energy storage unit was converted into beam rays, and the rays shot out in a torrent towards the sand dune before the mecha. This round of intense firepower actually turned the dune into a pit in an instant, but there were no mecha remains to be found inside. Besides yellow sand, there was just more yellow sand. Emergency activation 5.537 seconds. That J-8 mecha is most certainly a special class mecha. Its luck isn't bad, managing to finish activation within 6 seconds, remarked Little 4. If the mecha had finished activating just half a second slower, it would have been impossible for the J-8 mecha to evade the J-6 mecha's beam gun attack. Not good. The J-6 mecha, which had been attacking the dune, abruptly leapt into the air. In midair, it pointed the laser gun in its hands straight down towards the ground below it and pulled the trigger, sending a wave of energy pouring out once more. At the same time, a beam saber shot out from the sand, heading straight for the J-6, while a sturdy beam shield emerged to block off the J-6's beam attacks. Seeing that its beam gun attacks wouldn't be able to fend off the other, the wings on the J-6's back spread open to reveal 6 high-efficiency guided missiles and fired them immediately. The J-8 mecha had intended to pierce the J-6 mecha with its saber, but seeing the 6 missiles headed towards it, it knew that it wouldn't be able to hold them off with just a beam shield. It quickly reversed directions in midair, and under the combined screeching of the mecha's thrusters, it forcefully pushed its own large frame several hundred meters away from the missile's trajectory. At the same time, the mecha's arms crossed behind it, and the J-8 took out a beam laser cannon in an instant, keeping away its beam saber on its back. The mecha lifted the laser cannon with a strong left arm and steadied it with its right hand. It turned to face the 6 guided missiles coming after it, and the operator decisively pulled the trigger. An immense surge of energy spewed out from the mouth of the cannon, rushing up into the sky. When this energy surge made contact with the missiles were blown up one after another. These consecutive explosions shook Ling Lan's entire body violently, making her feel as if she were really on a battlefield. The J-8 mecha had finally wiped out the 6 threatening guided missiles, but the J-6 had also regained the attacking initiative. It flew up high into the air, aiming its laser beam gun at the J-8 on the ground and fired once more. Meanwhile, the J-8 had no means to retaliate at the moment, and could only scurry all over the ground to dodge the J-6's attacks. However, Ling Lan didn't think the J-6 had the upper hand. Instead, she felt that the J-8 was already slowly reclaiming the initiative in this match. This was because Ling Lan could see very clearly that the J-8's steps had never become disorganized. It was obviously using the most widespread and most adaptable footwork — split steps. Although the J-8 looked like it was being forced to flee helter-skelter like a mouse, every step it took was calculated to be on the most advantageous position, neutralizing every attack from the J-6 in the air. The J6 seemed to also have figured out that it wouldn't be able to hit its opponent just by relying on its laser beam gun. It lifted its wings once more, and a new round of high-efficiency guided missiles were launched. The 6 new missiles descended upon the J8 mecha below in a horizontal line. The J8 mecha didn't choose to retreat. It lifted its laser cannon again, and this time, it fired 3 laser beams simultaneously. What was surprising was that the 3 shots were timed in such a way that they also created a horizontal line, flying forwards to meet the 6 missiles head-on. When the first missile was set off, the following 2 missiles exploded as well. The concussive force from the explosion of the 3 missiles and the laser beams then set off the remaining 3 missiles. Once again, the J6's attacks were a bust. Besides that, due to the violent tremors from the explosion, yellow sand filled the air, obscuring the vision of the J6, preventing him from seeing what was happening below. Without thinking about it, the J6 shot downwards desperately with the beam gun in his hand. In the meantime, he was anxiously looking over the indicators from his heat detector, worried that the opponent would take advantage of his momentary loss of vision to fire its laser cannon. Right then, he suddenly noticed a beam of light shooting towards his lower belly without a sound. This attack came too swiftly, he had no time at all to defend. The body of his mecha was already out of time to dodge the attack. Quicker than words could say, the J6 decisively threw the laser beam gun in its hand onto the coming light beam. There was a loud boom as the two collided and the J6's laser gun was utterly destroyed by the beam. Still, the J6 was thrown back by the resulting force, away from the path of the light ray, narrowly avoiding the fate of being pierced clean through the stomach. That area was where the cockpit was. If it were hit, even if the operator didn't die, he would still lose control of the mecha. Either way, the J6 would have lost. It was then when everyone could finally see what was happening. It turned out that after swaths of yellow sand had been blown into the air, and while visibility was poor, the J8 mecha had sprung upwards and, working with the power of its thrusters, it had flown up into the air in a split second. It had gotten close to the J6, and then, the J8 had purposefully discarded its laser cannon in favor of stabbing its beam saber at the J6. A laser cannon shot produced heat, which would have been captured by the mecha's defensive systems, taking out the element of surprise from its attack. Thus, the J8 had chosen to use its beam saber, which was formed from cold light, because it was undetectable. However, the J6 had reacted extremely quickly. It had sensed danger within that split second and decisively surrendered its weapon in exchange for a chance at survival. Still, having lost its beam gun, the J6 could only fight with the J8 in melee combat. The moment they clashed, Ling Lan knew that the J6 mecha was definitely going to lose. In terms of combat instinct, the J6 was clearly weaker than the J8. They were on completely different levels. Of course, the other audience members did not have Ling Lan's vision and couldn't tell. After all, the two mecha were both fighting passionately, no clear winner or loser between the two of them. The fight looked like it was neck and neck, extremely exciting. The reason why Ling Lan could tell at a glance was completely due to her innate talent - profound insight. From the very beginning, she had identified the J6's weakness, and had also noticed that the J8 was not yet fighting with its full strength. Thus, Ling Lan knew that the difference between the J6's and J8's melee combat skills were actually very large. As expected, a cross-level challenge was not that easy. She lowered her head and sighed, choosing to withdraw. A mecha fight was actually not that much different from a real physical fight. With just a glance, Ling Lan could tell that quite a few of the moves had been inspired and based off of real physical combat. It was just that these moves were much swifter and more incisive in real combat, while they looked obviously clumsier when executed with mecha. Ling Lan had just withdrawn from the scene of the fight when she sensed something strange. The entire battle stadium was eerily silent and still. Everyone was sitting in their seats, unmoving. It looked like their attention had been completely captivated by the game fight in the other space. Still, she was a little creeped out by the stillness of the silent scene. She couldn't help but twist her neck around, just moving a little to prove that she was still a living person. "You didn't watch till the end?" The man beside her suddenly spoke up. Caught unprepared, Ling Lan was almost scared witless. Still, Ling Lan was still Ling Lan after all. After going through the insane torments of the learning space for so long, Ling Lan's little heart was unbelievably strong. "Yes, aren't you doing the same?" asked Ling Lan reflexively after collecting her wits. "The J6 is losing for sure. What else is there to see?" The man didn't seem to be in a good mood. "You chose the J6's viewing angle?" asked Ling Lan, tone almost certain. "I had wanted to see how a weaker person would be able to beat a stronger opponent. Unfortunately, that J6 wasted his own advantage." The man seemed to have a lot to complain about the J6's performance. What advantage did the J6 have? His combat instinct was obviously off, so Ling Lan really couldn't think of a way the J6 could win. "That J6 is a famous marksman, but unfortunately, he didn't show any of that skill in this match," said the man regretfully. It looked like he was very familiar with the J6's skills. "Marksman, with beam shields. There shouldn't be much a marksman can do though, right?" Ling Lan was recalling how the J8 mecha's beam shield had pretty much withstood the power of the laser gun. The J6 should have chosen to snipe. Melee combat is the J8's specialty. The man knew both combatants well. Ling Lan thought back to the attack when she had first started school. It had been so troublesome to be targeted by snipers, and nodded in agreement. Sniping was the best ambush, impossible to guard against absolutely. After all, a beam shield could only protect a specific spot and not the entire body. Moreover, sniping was undetectable. If the J6 had chosen to snipe from the very beginning, the outcome of this match might have been harder to tell. Seeing Ling Lan agree with his opinion, the man's mood took a turn for the better. But an upset is still a very difficult thing after all. Even if the J6 had scraped a win in this match, he would still lose the next match. The outcome would not change. Ling Lan understood what the man meant. If the J6 had sniped his way to victory in this match, his opponent in the next match would definitely be prepared with anti-sniping gear. In other words, the J6's sniping advantage would only be effective once. In the end, he would still have to rely on his own physical skills to pass. Perhaps the J6 understood this, and so decided to try a ranged attack where both sides could see one another. "I think that if he won 2 times in a row, he would definitely use his trump, sniping, in the third match," commented Ling Lan, putting herself in the J6's shoes. If it were her, she also wouldn't have used her pocket ace right at the start and let the opponents figure out a counter strategy. The man was silent, a little taken aback, before he made a low noise of agreement. Yet, Ling Lan could clearly sense that the other's mood had gotten worse somehow. This wasn't looking good. If the other's emotions became so terrible that he lost control, wouldn't she be in danger? Ling Lan had not forgotten that the other was a spiritual mutant turned specter that was capable of killing her consciousness. "I have to go now. Bye, big brother." That should be right, right? Even though she couldn't see his face clearly, just based off that lower jaw and those upturned lips, the man was clearly an adult. Big brother, goodbye." The man seemed to be rather taken aback by Ling Lan's address, pausing for a beat before responding. Ling Lan did not notice this. She was anxious to get as far away as she could from this dangerous man. After she heard him say goodbye, she hurriedly walked off, quickly leaving the man behind as she distanced herself from the Mecha Battle Stadium. The man muttered moodily to himself, "Could it be that I really look that old now, calling me big brother?" In a dark mood, he chose to exit from the battle stadium and then left the virtual world. Chapter 112, Mecha Training Hall. In a private manor on planet Azure, an old man was staring anxiously at a closed login pod to the virtual world. Soon, he saw the lights inside the login pod turn off and the pod's door suddenly opened. An androgynous, pretty child of about 11 or 12 years old was lying inside the pod. His face was pale and his entire body was currently drenched with sweat, as if he had been through some strenuous exercise. After several seconds, the child slowly opened his eyes. Seeing the old man before him, he smiled weakly and said, "Major Domo, Why are you waiting here? Are you still planning to fool me, young master? Your body is not well. Didn't your grandfather tell you not to go online? The majordomo's eyes held a trace of remonstration, but was mostly heartache. The pretty child continued to smile and said, no matter what, I still have to go online a few times. Otherwise, I won't be able to keep up with the pace of studies at school. The majordomo held back and said nothing more. He could not tell his young master not to study after all. He could only walk up to lift his young master out of the login pod, and put him into the prepped recovery pod at the side to rest. Looking at the sleeping figure of the lovely child before him, the majordomo heaved a heavy sigh. His heart was filled with affection and heartache for the child. It wasn't that easy to be the first in line to inherit. The young master excelled in every way, but his physical body was just too weak. His spiritual self-mutation was just too much of a burden on the body. Meanwhile, Ling Lan, celebrating for finally leaving the dangerous person behind, continued to browse the streets of the capital. It had taken so much trouble to come out this once, she should make full use of the chance and see her fill. Unknowingly, she found herself on yet another mecha street. This mecha street wasn't made up of mecha stores selling toys and figurines like those in the Central Scout Academy, but actually had stores selling real mecha, the strongest weapons of the Federation. Ling Lan took a cursory look as she walked down the street, and then chose to enter the NG1 mecha store at random. The moment Ling Lan entered the store, she saw several shop assistants chatting behind the store counter. The men and women were about to come forward to offer their assistance, but seeing Ling Lan walk in on her own, they stopped. Little Four pouted and complained, not coming forward to serve us. Do they think we have no money? In contrast, Ling Lan wasn't too surprised. My current appearance is that of a 16-year-old. With no accompanying guardian. Would you think that I'd be able to afford mecha? It's perfectly normal for them to ignore us. Besides, without them following us around, won't it be easier to browse as we like, even more fun? Little Four seemed to come to a realization. That's true. But I must still make sure they know in the future that boss is a wealthy person. Buying the best mecha here is not a problem. Little Four's expression was proud and cocky. Ling Lan's glanced at him. Looks like you've earned quite a bit in the virtual world. It's alright, not that much, probably about several 100,000 billion. This world may be lacking in some things, but it was certainly not lacking in people. Especially bored people. He had just randomly posted several novels online, and they were now all doing very well. Just the monetary awards from fans alone had contributed several 100 billion to Little Four's account. Ling Lan smiled and said, good job. Keep up the good work. Receiving Ling Lan's praise, Little Four was extremely happy. He was even happier over this than when he had conquered this virtual world. In his heart, he was more determined than ever to get all the Federation's money into his wallet. Let us give a round of applause for Little Four's grand goal. And let us wonder when Little Four will find out that the Federation's money will never ever run out. Right then, from among the shop assistants, a cheerful young man stepped out voluntarily. He approached Ling Lan and greeted her politely. Hello, I'm Assistant 017 of NG Mecha Store. May I know if you require any assistance? Thank you. But I'm just looking around. Ling Lan was a bit startled, but she demurely refused 017's offer of service. When Assistant 017 heard Ling Lan's response, he did not reveal any sign of disappointment. He just continued to smile brightly and said, customer, this should be your first time getting close to mecha, right? This customer with eyes full of curiosity. This should be the first time she is stepping into a mecha store. This scene made him recall his nervous excitement the first time he himself stepped into a mecha store. Back then, he had not known where to start and had really hoped someone would help him out. Perhaps this girl would also require some guidance like him did. It was this feeling that made 017 ignore the other shop assistants jeering and come over voluntarily. Ling Lan nodded firmly in answer to his question, for this was the truth. Assistant 017 smiled at this and indicated for Ling Lan to walk with him. He then brought Ling Lan to a section filled with basic mecha. This area was a place suitable for novices to purchase mecha. Inside was various models of basic mecha, totaling about 10 different types. Ling Lan took a quick look and couldn't help but frown. These 10 or so mecha all had differing shapes, but could overall be split into 3 categories. One category was bestial mecha, another was avian mecha, and the remaining category was the most commonly seen humanoid mecha. The reason Ling Lan was frowning was that these mecha models were much cruder than the 2 mecha she had seen at the Mecha Battle Stadium, whether it was in terms of coloring, form, or even in terms of weaponry and equipment. These mecha here were completely incomparable. If the 2 mecha she had seen at the Mecha Battle Stadium were considered adults, then these mecha here were undoubtedly toddler level. This made Ling Lan feel rather disappointed. Ling Lan's displeasure was clearly seen by Assistant 017, but he wasn't at all surprised by this. He explained kindly, "Customer, all the mecha in our federation are actually variations evolved from these 3 categories of basic mecha. If you want to become an outstanding mecha operator, you'll need to master the controls of these 3 types of basic mecha. If you do this, no matter what type of advanced mecha you try to operate in the future, you'll be able to pick it up quickly." Hearing this, Ling Lan was moved. She packed away her initial scorn. She would never forget the importance of basics. Both the learning space and her father Ling Zhao had strongly emphasized the importance of basics. It played a large role in determining the final outcome of an individual's personal growth. A warning flag rose up in Ling Lan's heart. She couldn't believe that she had actually made the low-level mistake of judging by appearances. It looked like the previous period of smooth sailing had made her forget to be humble and cautious, and actually become as arrogant as Yelang too. Ling Lan's shift in attitude made Assistant 017 nod internally, his impression of her becoming even better. He continued to say, "Actually, I don't recommend you to buy a mecha right now. In fact, the virtual world has mecha training halls that specialize in teaching the controls of the basic mecha. Customer, you can first go there to learn more." Ling Lan thanked Assistant 017. If it weren't for his help, she wouldn't have known that the virtual world had these things. After she asked Assistant 017 how to get to a mecha training hall, she left the Anji Mecha store. Assistant 017 sent Ling Lan off with a smile, and returned to the counter. He was welcomed back by the scornful jeers of the other shop assistants. "Wasted your energy, didn't you? I told you that that girl had no money. At that age with no guardian along, she was definitely just here to look around. She would never have bought something as expensive as a mecha." 017, you just wouldn't believe it and still wanted to go forward. "See? You've got nothing to show for it. Even if you wanted to gain more sales to earn a higher commission, you still need to find the right targets." Assistant 017 did not get angry, only replying with a smile, "I wasn't doing it for sales. I just felt that she naturally belonged with mecha." Assistant 017's words caused the other shop assistants to burst out into uncontrollable laughter, all of them mocking him and asking him when he had become a fortune teller. Mind you, girls, due to biological reasons, very rarely advance to become high-level mecha operators. So, among the millions and millions of mecha operators in the Federation, just having 1,000 female mecha operators was already considered a lot. 017 was unperturbed by the mass mocking, only smiling and shaking his head in response. This carefree attitude of his soon sapped the interest of the others in mocking him, and they all left to do their own things. All of them did not know what 017 was thinking. The closer he got to that girl, the more he had sensed it. The future of that girl on the path of mecha was boundless. 017 smiled again. It's also a good thing to build up some good karma. Very quickly, Ling Lan had found the mecha training hall. The moment she neared the entrance, a line of text appeared before her eyes. "Do you want to formally enter mecha combat? Oh. So this here is also a mecha fighting game," Little Four exclaimed when he saw these words. Ling Lan understood then that the mecha training was most likely connected to the mecha fighting game. Ling Lan would naturally have to join the game, or else how would she be able to learn and train in the mecha controls? The moment Ling Lan made her choice, she was transported straight into a large hall. Inside, there stood a handsome soldier, and there were 3 hulking basic mecha standing beside him. Ling Lan walked to stand before the soldier, but before she could say anything, the soldier asked, "Recruit, do you want to first understand more about the combat styles of the 3 mecha, their controls, or do you just want to choose a mecha directly?" Ling Lan was a cautious person. She did not understand much about mecha yet, so she of course chose to first learn more about the 3 mechas' combat styles and controls. Very quickly, 2 images appeared before Ling Lan. One of the panels was playing a video of the movements of the mecha from the outside, while the other panel showed the movements of the mecha operator inside the cockpit which caused that movement. Ling Lan saw a pair of hands flying rapidly within the cockpit, and following the motions, the mecha in the other panel made a reactionary movement. For just one basic movement, the fingers in the cockpit had to make over 10 motions. For instance, just taking one step involved the mecha's pelvis, knee, ankle, balance, as well as the energy distribution between its 2 legs. Ling Lan had counted, and just such a simple movement required 18 control motions from the cockpit in an instant, and this was still considered an easy movement. It's very challenging, actually being all manually controlled. There's a lot of pressure on hand speed. Ling Lan was very surprised. She had always thought that operating a mecha was just like driving, with a control stick or something similar. Aren't these things what Daddy has been teaching? If it weren't for the fact that boss you were having trouble with it, we wouldn't have come out to sightsee. I wonder if you mix your training with operating a mecha, would the effect be better? If we could just break past boss's bottleneck in one go, that'd be great, suggested Little Four. By now, Little Four was already calling Ling Zhao daddy. This was because Ling Lan had once heard Little Four say boss's daddy something something blah blah blah, and felt that it sounded somewhat awkward. Besides, she had always considered Little Four, who had traveled along with her to this future, as her little brother. So she decided to just ask Little Four to call Ling Zhao daddy alongside her. Chapter 113, Rabbit Mecha? Perhaps the learning space had tweaked Ling Lan to become more boyish in personality, for her interest towards mecha was at an unprecedented high. She not only looked over the controls of all 3 basic mecha, but also eyed all the basic mecha models greedily. She found that she really liked every single type of mecha she saw, so much so that she really wished that she could own all of them. Sensing Ling Lan's greed, the soldier told Ling Lan steadily that all recruits were only allowed to choose one mecha to start. If she wanted to own more, she would have to rely on her own efforts to earn more points to redeem new mecha. The soldier's words caused Ling Lan to calm down instantly. She began to consider which type of mecha she should choose as her initiate mecha. Ling Lan was a little uneasy, afraid that she would choose wrongly. Still, Ling Lan was a good child. She just loved to ask questions, a habit trained up in the learning space. So, she asked the soldier, as a beginner, which mecha was best suited for her. In fact, the first person Ling Lan asked was Little Four, but unfortunately, Little Four also didn't know which of the 3 mecha before them was best or most appropriate for her. His familiarity with this world's mecha was not much better than Ling Lan's. Ling Lan had no choice but to go to her second option and ask the soldier. Unexpectedly, Ling Lan really struck the nail on the head. The game system had indeed arranged it so that the soldier would be able to answer this type of question. When the soldier heard Ling Lan's question, he gave a straight answer. The mecha with the easiest controls, which are the easiest for beginners to learn, is the Bestial Mecha. I recommend you begin training from Bestial Mecha. Since the soldier who was familiar with mecha had already said so, it shouldn't be wrong. Ling Lan immediately selected the Bestial Mecha without any hesitation. She had barely spoken when, with a wave of the soldier's hand, a large spin wheel appeared abruptly before Ling Lan. On the spin wheel, Ling Lan could see countless images of Bestial Mecha. There was a ferocious cheetah and lion, and an ugly spider and giant ant, and of course, right in the middle of the wheel was a large compass needle pointing at those images of Bestial Mecha. What is this? Ling Lan stared at it all blankly. Then, shocked realization stole over her face. Could it be that obtaining a mecha also depends on luck? A beginner's mecha is gifted by the system, so, A beginner has no right to choose the mecha. Which mecha model they get will be determined randomly by this spin wheel, explained the soldier. Luck is also a form of strength. You should anticipate your luck and hope it brings you a strong and powerful mecha. In Ling Lan's eyes, the soldier's current smile was filled with schadenfreude. Ling Lan didn't know what the other beginners felt during their first time here, but Ling Lan's teeth were currently aching from holding back her irritation. She really wished she could just send a punch flying, and blow that despicable smile off the other's face. Of course, Ling Lan could only think about it and not actually do it. After all, she still had to rely on the other to get her mecha. Ling Lan spun the spin wheel forcefully. The spin wheel spun frenetically, and then gradually slowed down as time went by. Finally, it got slower and slower, and just as it was about to stop on a Panther-type mecha, the needle jumped unexpectedly. Ling Lan hadn't even managed to take a good look at which mecha model the needle was pointing at when with a pop, confetti swirled through the air. Then, an extremely cute giant rabbit abruptly appeared before her. Ling Lan was gobsmacked. A rabbit? Why a rabbit? Even an ugly spider or ant would be more fearsome than a rabbit. With some difficulty, Ling Lan calmed herself down. Then, she saw the weapon in the rabbit's hands, and Ling Lan found herself utterly lost for words. Damn it, this nonsense system. You're really shameless, actually equipping a rabbit mecha with a carrot. Do you really think this rabbit here is a real rabbit? Within the mind space, however, Little Four had stars in his eyes. With his hands framing his face, he wriggled his butt and shouted, "Boss, this mecha is so pretty and cute. I like it." When the soldier saw the rabbit mecha appear, the smile on his face grew even wider. "Congratulations, recruit, on obtaining our Federation's newest rabbit mecha model." That said, he reached out a hand to pass a white item that resembled a remote control to Ling Lan. Ling Lan took the item. It was obvious that this was the activation key of the rabbit mecha. She said sullenly, "If you don't congratulate me, I think I might be happier." The soldier seemed oblivious to Ling Lan's sour mood. His expression suddenly turned grim, and he issued a command. "In that case, recruit, get into your mecha immediately. We'll begin training in the basic controls now." "Yes." Ling Lan stood at attention to receive the order, and then pressed a button on the remote key. The door to the cockpit on the belly of the rabbit mecha swung open. Ling Lan leapt up in one big stride, and then with several consecutive hops, she smoothly made her way into the cockpit. Lying down, she pressed the button once again and the cockpit door closed, turning the rabbit into a whole rabbit once again. Ling Lan had just finished doing this when the soldier waved his hand, and the rabbit mecha with Ling Lan inside it disappeared from this login point. They reappeared in a room specially for training the basic movements, such as jumping and running. At this moment, Ling Lan chose to activate the mecha. Of course, she chose regular activation. After approximately 3 minutes, the rabbit mecha completed its activation. Just as Ling Lan was about to turn on all the screens, she noticed that a line of text had appeared on the main screen before her eyes. Basic control instructions for the rabbit mecha. Following these instructions, Ling Lan finally understood the functions of the buttons before her. She had initially thought there was no control stick, but in fact, there was. It's just that the control stick was located among a sea of buttons. Back when Ling Lan had been watching the demo operations, because she had been dazzled by the hand speed, she hadn't noticed it. As those fingers had flown over the control panel, the control stick was actually the item that was used most frequently. Who knew mecha controls are actually this complicated? In the past, when I watched the mecha fights, I thought it would be as simple as physical combat. Looks like I've underestimated mecha operators after all. Just trying to understand and remember the array of buttons before her, Ling Lan felt the onset of a minor headache. Relax, boss. As long as the mecha's AI is evolved, it won't be as complicated to operate anymore. Little Four had been looking over the mecha's AI closely, considering how he could improve it to help his boss save some energy. But Ling Lan stopped Little Four, saying, "Little Four, don't improve the mecha's AI." Little Four was puzzled. "Why not? I came here to learn, so I should do it like the other children and start from the basics. The instructors in the learning space and my dad all repeatedly stress the importance of the basics. I cannot just avoid them because I'm afraid of trouble, explained Ling Lan. Besides, this is the virtual world. Not only is there systemic monitoring, there are also those dangerous figures with mutated spiritual selves. No one knows whether this area is being monitored. I don't wish for you to be in any danger. Ling Lan's concerned words made Little Four unable to protest, so he could only nod obediently and promise not to do anything to help Ling Lan with this. However, as a result, Little Four wasn't in a very good mood, because he found that the areas where he could help his boss were really just too few. Seeing this, Ling Lan quickly changed the topic. Little Four, what do you think was the mecha type our dad used when he first started learning? If it was a bestial type, was the mecha he received also very silly? The more Ling Lan talked about it, the more curious she was. As expected, Little Four's attention was pulled away by Ling Lan, and he found he had something new to do. Excitedly, he told Ling Lan to wait for a moment, and he then scampered off to collect all the information he could find on Ling Zhao. Although Ling Zhao's data was labeled as S-class, who was Little Four, he was a virtual god. There wasn't anything that couldn't be done as long as he wanted to do it. Previously, it was just that he hadn't thought to collect Ling Zhao's data, which was why he didn't have any on him right now. But now that boss had indicated interest, as his boss's follower, he would definitely satisfy his boss's curiosity. Very quickly, Little Four returned, face filled with excitement. He said, boss, do you know who our daddy is? Oh wow, he's just too incredible. Ling Lan's curiosity was instantly ignited by Little Four. After some thought, she said, Dad's military rank is Major General. Could it be that he's a special class mecha operator? Ling Lan vaguely remembered that Little Four had mentioned special class mecha before. The associated operator rank should be special class mecha operator, right? Little Four shook a finger as he said proudly, nope. Mecha operators are not categorized that way. Following that, Little Four gave a breakdown on the levels of mecha operators in this world. Mecha operators are also called Mecha Warrior Masters. From the name alone, you can tell that there are two titles included. One is Mecha Warrior, while the other is Mecha Master. Operators of Advanced Mecha and below, inclusive of Advanced Mecha themselves, are collectively called Mecha Warriors, while those who operate Special Class Mecha and above are called Mecha Masters. Mecha Warriors are then further divided into Trainee Mecha Warriors, Junior Mecha Warriors, Intermediate Mecha Warriors, and Advanced Mecha Warriors. The corresponding mecha they pilot are Trainee Mecha, Junior Mecha, Intermediate Mecha, and Advanced Mecha. Meanwhile, Mecha Masters are divided into Special Class Mecha Masters, Ace Mecha Masters, Imperial Mecha Masters, and God Class Mecha Masters. Special Class Mecha Masters and Ace Mecha Masters both pilot Special Class Mecha, though an Ace Mecha Master would have a higher level of control over their mecha. Imperial Mecha Masters pilot Imperial Mecha, while God Class Mecha Masters naturally operate the Federation's ultimate weapons, God Class Mecha 1. But this is just the military's internal categorization. For the public, the distinctions are not that discrete. All the Mecha Warriors and Mecha Masters are just called Mecha Operators. Generally speaking, Imperial operators and above will not be deployed in cases of war. This is because these type of mecha operators are beings that can decide the outcome of a war. As such, each country has agreements binding them, which will not be broken unless under special circumstances. God-class operators are an even more fearsome and threatening existence. The Federation can possess such a vast expanse of land and distant boundaries all because the Federation has the highest number of God-class operators among the neighboring countries. Boss, now take a guess, which level of operator does our dad belong to? Little Four's brows and eyes were all scrunched up in a line from his exuberant smile. It was clear that he was in an excellent mood. Seeing you so happy, our dad must be pretty well ranked. Could it be that he had already become an ace operator? Ling Lan thought back to her dad in the legacy mission. He was so unbelievably young. If he had really managed to achieve ace operator status, he would definitely already be among the best and brightest. No, That's wrong, that's wrong." Little Four glared at Ling Lan with contempt, somewhat miffed at Ling Lan for underestimating their dad. Chapter 114, God-class operator Ling Zhao. Ling Lan was shocked. Could it be that our dad had already reached imperial level? Heavens, their old man was just too abnormal. Little Four's expression was sullen. Couldn't boss take a more adventurous guess? The moody Little Four did not answer Ling Lan directly, but merely read the contents of a military report he had found to her. The Federation originally had 12 God-class operators, but 8 years ago, they unexpectedly lost one of them, the youngest God-class operator of the Federation. That God-class operator had lost his life in a death tunnel on the evening of the day he was deployed to the enemy nation. 8 years ago? Death tunnel? What a coincidence. Dying on the same year and the same place as her old man. Ling Lan's brows furrowed. Little Four wouldn't have brought up unrelated things in their conversation. Could it be that this had something to do with her dad? Before Ling Lan could figure it out, Little Four tacked on a sentence that made Ling Lan blank out. The mecha of that God-class operator is named after a long while. Ling Lan asked shakily, "You're saying that that God-class operator is Ling Zhao?" Little Four nodded. "Yes, the only person to have advanced to God-class operator status in the Federation in the last 10 years, also the youngest ever in history to achieve that status. This person is Ling Zhao." "Lies!" yelled Ling Lan suddenly. Little Four was taken aback. He had not expected that Ling Lan's reaction would be so dramatic, even outright rejecting this news. If he really were a God-class operator, then how could he have been deployed? "Didn't you say that Imperial levels and above were not allowed to be deployed randomly? Plus, aren't God-class mecha the Federation's ultimate weapons? Such a formidable weapon. How could the person who controlled one die so easily?" Seated within the rabbit mecha, Ling Lan involuntarily clenched her fists tightly. If Ling Zhao had been weaker, Ling Lan could still have accepted him dying just like that. But the Ling Zhao being described by Little Four was just too strong. Such a powerful man dying so simply. She just found it a little hilarious and unbelievable. "According to the top-secret files I found within the military, our dad only used 6 years to ascend from ace operator to God-class operator status, successfully advancing to Imperial operator status in star calendar year 4725, then successfully advancing to God-class operator status in star calendar year 4728. However, from the moment Dad became an Imperial operator, this information had been sealed by the military. Around that time, the military probably already had plans to hide Dad's real status and deploy him to fight the enemy nation. So, that year when Dad was deployed, he did so under the identity of an ace operator. This was also why Dad only had the military rank of Major General. If he had gone as a God-class operator, he would at least have gotten the military rank of General. Little Four's tone was regretful. If Ling Zhao had passed away with the rank of General, the resources Ling Lan inherited would have been much more substantial. The innocent and simple-minded Little Four didn't consider the fact that if things really panned out as he thought, the people who would set their eyes on those resources wouldn't just be the small Ling elite family. It was highly likely that greater forces would be drawn as well. At that point, Ling Lan may very well have lost the right to inherit completely. Little Four's regrets only lasted for a moment. He moved on to say, "The Federation was initially planning to pull a fast one by deploying Ling Zhao into battle, hoping to uproot our historical enemy, the Twilight Empire, in one stroke. However, for some unknown reason, the upper ranks of the military sent down the order for Ling Zhao to lead a fleet through the Death Tunnel to sneak behind the enemy nation, in preparation for a pincer attack. Unexpectedly, the fleet encountered violent energy turbulence from deep within the Death Tunnel and lost their lives. It's really so coincidental." At this moment, a trace of an ice-cold smile hung on Ling Lan's lips, causing chills to run through Little Four's heart. It turned out that, subconsciously, Ling Lan had begun to emit the killing intent she had amassed in the learning space. Yup, it's so coincidental that it's suspicious. In fact, there was indeed something wrong with the military command. And the energy turbulence within the death tunnel wasn't formed naturally as well. Little Four centered himself and continued to tell Ling Lan what he had found. Little Four's searching capabilities were undoubtedly powerful, proving that he was truly the virtual god he claimed to be. Of course, Little Four was also putting in so much effort because Ling Zhao was now his daddy as well. He had to find out all he could about his daddy so that if anyone asked him about it in future, he would be able to give a proper answer. Still, he had not expected that this serious search of his would actually turn up some problems. Looks like this was a plot targeting my dad. Ling Lan fully believed in Little Four's abilities. If Little Four said there was a problem, then there must certainly be a problem. Moreover, Ling Lan too had thought from the start that all these coincidences stacking up together was unlikely to truly be coincidence. Yes, I can confirm that our daddy really did die from a sinister plot, said Little Four decisively. Originally, the complete annihilation of Ling Zhao's fleet had struck a heavy blow on the morale of the Federation. However, the military acted quickly. They immediately announced Ling Zhao's status as a God-class operator, along with the reason for his death. They claimed that he was killed by a plot of the Twilight Empire. This caused the fighting between the Federation and the Twilight Empire to escalate immediately, until it truly reached the point where there wouldn't be peace till one side was defeated. Now, the fighting has been going on for 8 years, and there are still no signs of stopping. There have already been countless deaths and injuries of the military on both sides. Ling Lan was rather surprised. Why would Dad's death cause such an outcome? Little Four sighed. Boss, you don't understand the position God-class operators have within the hearts of the Federation soldiers. God-class operators are like gods to military staff, and Ling Zhao was the youngest one. His victories spurred the excitement of all the soldiers. It could be said that Ling Zhao was the idol of the entire military. Also, because Ling Zhao was the youngest of the God-class operators, he had much more potential and room to grow than the other God-class operators. It was almost certain that he would have become the guardian deity of the Federation for the next 40 to 50 years. Think about it. Their guardian deity was sacrificed to an underhanded plot of the enemy nation. How could the soldiers of the Federation just let it rest? So they could only continue to fight endlessly until one of the countries no longer has the ability to fight. Listening till this point, Ling Lan descended into deep thought. She recalled how when others had fought over her right to inherit, the military had chosen to just stand by and watch. Then she thought about when she was ambushed on her way to school. And then, there was her father's legacy mission. He had set up so many obstacles and tricks, just so he could narrow down the selection and find her. She felt like she understood things a bit better now. The people within the upper ranks of the military who had caused Ling Zhao's death had not loosened their monitoring of the Ling family. It seemed that they did not want to see anyone from the Ling family appear in the military world. Little Four, looks like we need to find the people in the upper ranks of the military who killed my dad, said Ling Lan with an icy smile. Ah, why? Little Four didn't understand. For one, Ling Zhao's blood flows within this body of mine, and I am also learning from Ling Zhao's legacy. Whether it's a life debt, or a mentorship debt, I need to avenge Ling Zhao. I cannot just allow him to die senselessly. Secondly, in these 8 years, I believe the other has been monitoring us all this while. The moment we stand out a little in the military world, the other will definitely not hesitate to kill us off. I don't wish to live with this hidden knife hanging over our heads. Ling Lan's words drew Little Four's bitter anger towards a common enemy. He immediately said, "Don't worry, boss. Leave the virtual world to me." Little Four recalled the monitoring of the legacy mission, and reminded himself again and again that he needed to be more careful than careful. He must not reveal any openings that could bring the threat of death to his boss. Right after that, Little Four tacked on worriedly, "But that person still hasn't been exposed till now." Being able to kill Dad without anyone finding out about them, they must be a skilled schemer. Can we beat him? Little Four didn't think his boss was the type that plotted well. "If I can't do it alone, I'll just have to find a few helpers." Ling Lan smiled coldly. Initially, she had not wanted to be a boss, but reality was forcing her to become one even if she didn't want to. How could she go up against some military bigwigs without having some helpers on her side? That's right. Ling Lan's sights were now set on Han Jijian. Ling Lan had full confidence in her fighting skills, if she just worked at it. Though she couldn't guarantee she'd reach God class level, getting to ace or imperial level was still possible. However, when it came to plotting and scheming, Ling Lan was at a loss, while the opponent was a master at it. Therefore, she could only seek external help. Now, of the few followers by her side, only Han Jijian's intelligence was clearly ahead above the others, and recently, that intelligence was gradually moving towards the side of cunning and slyness. It looked like she would have to push things a little more, and make Han Jijian become even more sly and cunning. That's what Ling Lan was thinking. After making this decision, Ling Lan pushed the matter aside. After all, it was still too early to look for the opponent. Ling Lan wouldn't rush to seek out the others' tracks now while her own wings were still developing. Temporarily setting the matter aside, Ling Lan started to study the controls of the rabbit mecha seriously, slowly experimenting with making the mecha walk. After all, this was the very first step of controlling mecha. Have you ever seen a mecha that couldn't walk, but which could hack at someone with a knife? Alright, the walk of bestial mecha was more like jumps and leaps, especially for a rabbit. The hind legs were designed to be much stouter than the forelegs, so Ling Lan would first have to learn how to get the hind legs to spring. Luckily, Ling Lan need only control it with her fingers, so there was no discomfort in trying to adapt. After stumbling and face-planting a couple of times, Ling Lan finally grasped hold of the ability to move the rabbit mecha. Of course, she still could not get the mecha to hop in a straight line just yet. Watching as her mecha jumped left and right, but never in a straight line, Ling Lan's sweat dropped. Just like that, Ling Lan immersed herself in mecha training. By the time Little Four nudged her back to awareness of her surroundings, it was already time to log off. Because Ling Lan had Little Four to cover for her, she logged off directly at the mecha training hall. Strolling out of the login pod, she took a quick shower and then went downstairs. In the dining room, Lan Luofeng was humming as she set out dishes on the table. Of course, these dishes were all prepared by the servants. Lan Luofeng was a young mistress of a noble family who had led a pampered life. The most she could do was fry an egg, and even then the quality was not guaranteed. It could very well be undercooked or overcooked. Seeing Ling Lan come down, Lan Luofeng smiled. "My baby, if you still hadn't come down, I was about to go up and call you." There was nothing Ling Lan could say in response to this. Previously, there had been several times when she had been forced offline by Lan Luofeng's persistent pestering. Her mum was the type of person that wouldn't give up before she achieved her goal. Trying to match her in terms of patience, Ling Lan didn't think much of her odds. Ling Lan and Lan Luofeng ate together as usual. Ling Lan had only taken a few bites when she could not help but ask, "Mum, did you know that Dad was a God-class operator?" Lan Luofeng nodded. "I knew." "Why didn't you tell me?" asked Ling Lan moodily. Chapter 115, The Tragic Rabbit. "Why should I have told you? Would his being a God-class operator affect your life in any way?" Lan Luofeng cast a confused glance at Ling Lan. "Not to mention he has already left us, and even if he were by our side, whether or not he is a God-class operator, what does that have to do with us?" Ling Lan thought about it and felt that what Lan Luofeng said was correct. Knowing if Ling Zhao was a God-class operator or not really didn't have much impact on her life at all. Lan Luofeng picked up a mouthful of Ling Lan's favorite side dish with her chopsticks and placed it in Ling Lan's bowl, and continued to say, "Also, Ling Zhao is just Ling Zhao. He's a normal person, and also my husband, your daddy. Whether he's a God-class operator or not, he's still my husband and your daddy. These two identities will never change." Lan Luofeng's words caused Ling Lan's body to jerk in realization, and the restlessness she had felt after finding out that Ling Zhao was a God-class operator abruptly disappeared. "Also, baby Lan, don't let your daddy's status influence your choices in the future. You must remember, you are you. You just coincidentally have a father named Ling Zhao. That's all. Lan Luofeng was somewhat worried, afraid that her daughter would choose to do things she didn't like just because of Ling Zhao, like try to become a mecha operator or something. I hope that you'll choose what you like to do in the future, and not choose out of some obligation or whatever other reason. Lan Luofeng's words caused Ling Lan to look at her mum with new eyes. She felt as if she was getting to know a new side of Lan Luofeng. Ling Lan reckoned that among all the females that her dad had encountered, her mum was the only one who didn't treat her dad as someone overwhelmingly strong or an idol or perhaps even as a long-term food provider. She had very simply and purely seen him as a regular person to live an average life with, and so, her dad had chosen her mum. Yup. Decisively making a move even before her mum had become an adult. "Thanks, Mum," said Ling Lan sincerely. She finished off all of the side dishes that Lan Luofeng had given her and then lifted her head from her bowl to ask, "Mum, say, do you think Dad could still be alive?" Lan Luofeng's lips bloomed with a radiant smile, and she nodded decisively and said, "Yes, I think your daddy wouldn't die so easily. He is a God-class operator." Her tone concealed none of her admiration and pride for Ling Zhao. Ling Lan smiled too then. Since her own mum wished for this, then she would also hold on to this hope as well. Besides, it was just like her mum said, a God-class operator wouldn't just die that easily. Ling Lan finished eating and then went with her mum to the field outside to walk off the meal. After that, she returned to a training room to practice several sets of physical skills. In particular, Ling Lan ran through the Scout Academy's foundational physical skills set at least 10 times, because Ling Zhao had mentioned that this set of physical skills was not as simple as it seemed. It may even be a great help when operating mecha and advancing in the future. At the end, she took a shower and lay down to sleep. Entering the learning space as usual, she saw Little Four sitting on the ground. There were countless papers piled high beside him, and he was flipping through several more sheets of paper in his hands. Ling Lan asked curiously, "Little Four, what are you doing?" Perhaps Little Four had been too engrossed in what he was doing. He was so frightened by Ling Lan's voice that he flung his arms out. The papers in his hands were thrown into the air, and one of them landed on his head. Little Four quickly pulled down that piece of paper. Seeing Ling Lan grinning at him, as if amused by his panicked performance, Little Four said grumpily, "Boss, why did you have to sneak up on me? You almost scared me to death." "Scared you to death? Why, were you doing something bad?" teased Ling Lan. Unexpectedly, Little Four's face paled. He quickly reached out and gathered the papers in front of him, pulling them close. Ling Lan looked at him suspiciously and said, "Don't tell me you really were doing something bad." Little Four choked out a nervous laugh. "No way, I was just gathering some information, things about Dad and also stuff about mecha." When Little Four mentioned mecha, he was mumbling somewhat unintelligibly, but Ling Lan's attention had been fully captured by things about Dad. She cautioned Little Four, "Gathering the information may be important, but make sure you stay concealed. Don't let anyone discover you." Little Four smiled and said, "Relax, boss." "Still." Ling Lan pointed at the pile of paper in front of Little Four, "Is this necessary?" Frankly, Little Four could just absorb the information directly into his system procedures. He really didn't have to materialize the information onto these sheets and sheets of white paper. "Boss, don't you feel that words on paper is classy?" asked Little Four, expression dreamy. "Reading from paper, doesn't it make me seem very intelligent?" "This troublemaking brat, so he's just trying to show off," Ling Lan said huffily. "In that case, you can continue being intelligent. I'm going into the learning space to learn now." Ling Lan's unimpressed attitude made Little Four feel that there was now a generation gap between him and boss. Thus, he sulkily waved Ling Lan away, indicating for her to not disturb his work. Ling Lan could only shake her head silently at Little Four's heartlessness. She sighed to herself, mourning the fact that little brats nowadays were just too spoiled and pampered. She was just about to push open the doors to the physical skills learning area when from the corner of her eye, she noticed a large door to the side. A word had finally appeared on it, Mecha. Could it be that because she had encountered Mecha, The learning space had also activated a mecha course. Ling Lan's heart heated up and she decisively turned away from the physical skills doorway. Tentatively, she prodded the door labeled mecha and felt it move slightly. It wasn't like before when the door was fused to the wall, completely immovable. Ling Lan gave the door a hard shove and the door swung open with a bang. She walked inside and saw an endless space. In the near distance, a rugged soldier with a full beard was guffawing boisterously as he watched her approach. "Ha ha, Ling Lan, you're finally here." The soldier's energetic greeting made Ling Lan glance at him cautiously. Could he be a new instructor? The personalities of the instructors Ling Lan had met so far were all different. Number 1 was cold and cool to the extreme, and meant every word he said. Number 5 liked to laugh, but was sly and manipulative to the extreme, and was unbelievably perverse, capable of chilling others to the bone. Number 9 was very strict and looked very cold and aloof, but was actually a woman with a soft heart. Ling Lan had received much care from her since the very beginning. As such, Ling Lan wasn't afraid of stern-faced teachers, but was fearful of those with smiling faces and passionate appearances. She had been traumatized by Number 5's torments. So, seeing the other's enthusiasm and wide smile, she was instantly on her guard. If by any chance this was another instructor like Number 5, she would definitely be toyed with most terribly. "Don't think so much. I'm not Number 5. I have no interest in torturing people." "Right, I'm your mecha instructor, Number 3. In fact, when you turned 6 years old, I had already wanted to activate the mecha course, but, due to your real-life situation back then, Big Brother Number 1 refused my request. I had thought that I'd have to wait for another 5 to 6 years before it came up again. Unexpectedly, you activated it yourself after just 1 year. Ha 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 ha. That's great." Number 3 laughed up at the sky, as if immensely pleased with Ling Lan's choice. Looks like he had really become impatient with waiting. The laughter finally stopped, but before Ling Lan could ask any questions, Number 3 snapped his fingers. A rabbit mecha dropped from the sky, landing directly in front of Ling Lan. Ling Lan could only stare blankly at its familiar appearance. "Why is it this mecha?" Number 3 replied helplessly, "Can't help it. Our mecha's controls are somewhat different from those in your world, so we had to let the space assistant gather all the mecha models and controls of this world. So far, the space assistant has only sent in the data for this one mecha. Of course, this is also because you selected this mecha." Ling Lan finally understood why Little Four had had that dodgy look in the hall of the learning space. It turned out that he had secretly sent the stats of the rabbit mecha into the learning space, making it the initiate mecha for her mecha training. Damn it. He knew that she didn't really like the rabbit mecha. Couldn't he have changed things a little and brought in some other models? Of course, Ling Lan was most upset at her own luck. If she had managed to draw a more formidable mecha to begin with, then she wouldn't have to take Number 3's mocking gaze. Regardless of how gloomy Ling Lan felt, she still had to listen to instructor Number 3's commands. She got into the cockpit of the rabbit mecha. As expected, the control buttons were the same, no changes whatsoever. Ling Lan activated the mecha, and the mecha quickly booted up successfully. She then opened the mecha's screen to display the situation outside, but found that the initially vacant and open space had now become an extremely narrow tunnel. By Ling Lan's estimation, the tunnel was just 1.5 times the width of the mecha itself. To successfully make her way through the tunnel, it would require very fine control of the mecha's movement. Additionally, there were also some irregular obstacles within the tunnel, on the floor, and on the walls on both sides, which were probably designed to test a mecha operator's ability to handle the controls to adjust to circumstances. Firstly, you'll need to go through obstacle course training. Can you see the numbers on the bottom of the screen? Number 3's voice rang out beside Ling Lan's ear. Ling Lan looked at the screen as instructor Number 3 said, and sure enough, on the lower part of the screen, the numbers 03.00.00 were flashing at her, reminding Ling Lan of their existence. This is a countdown timer for 3 minutes. You'll need to complete this obstacle course within 3 minutes to pass, and your deadline to complete this mission is just 1 week. Number three's tone was tinged with obvious schadenfreude, FCK, teaching her nothing and giving her a mission right off the bat. Instructor number three, you're a mecha instructor, not a mission distributor. Isn't what you're doing too shameless? Before Ling Lan could give voice to her complaints, the flashing numbers on the lower half of the screen began to count down rapidly. Ling Lan's eyelid twitched. Abruptly, she found that with the speed of her mecha's jumps, 3 minutes weren't long at all. At this moment, number three's gleeful voice rang out once more. Oh right, every time you fail an attempt, the system will dole out punishment. You hang in there now. Hearing this, Ling Lan frantically operated her mecha. Her fingers flew, actually blowing past the speed limits she had managed to achieve before this. The system's punishment was not pleasant at all. She really didn't want to experience it ever again. However, dreams are beautiful but reality is cruel. Ling Lan slammed into a wall for the nth time, and after repeatedly embodying the rabbit in the tail waiting for a rabbit by a tree stump 1, the timer finally hit 0. Overall, she had only managed to jump forward a few meters. Oh, tragic rabbit. Ling Lan had yet to finish bemoaning the poor rabbit when a wave of numbing pain swept over her body. Chapter 116, Arbitrary Punishment. Damn it, I just knew this would happen. Ling Lan swore loudly. She could almost see the faint smoke rising from her mouth. Ugh. She was about to be completely cooked by electricity. Unfortunately, before she could get over the pain and numbness left by this electrocution, the scene before her shifted abruptly. She was brought along with her mecha back to the start of the obstacle course, and then, the learning space did not give Ling Lan any time to rest, immediately restarting the 3-minute countdown once more. Seeing this, Ling Lan finally couldn't help but curse silently. Fuck. After that, it was another flurry of frantic movements to control the rabbit mecha, to send it lunging out desperately. Perhaps tragedy likes to repeat itself, for Ling Lan had only taken a few hops when she once again slammed into a wall. And then she bounced back, and hit the wall again, and bounced back, and in the end, she still hit the wall again. The image before Ling Lan was a constant loop of falling and rolling around. The result of all this wall slamming was a dizzy head and spinning eyes. Once again, Ling Lan was experiencing the feelings of the unfortunate rabbit in the folk tale of waiting for a rabbit by a tree stump. Failure, followed by yet more failure. Electrocution after electrocution. Restart after restart. Ling Lan had no idea how many times she had restarted this mission anymore. She estimated that she hadn't even managed to get 50 meters into the tunnel so far, and what's worse, she didn't even know how long this blasted tunnel was in total. The reason to blame for Ling Lan's constant wall slamming was that the tunnel was really just too narrow. There were times when Ling Lan clearly felt she had not made any mistakes with the controls, and even the screen display was telling her that her jump coordinates were in a straight line, but unfortunately, the mecha still somehow ended up slamming into the wall. This caused Ling Lan to become rather discouraged, frustration rearing up within her heart. God damn it, this tunnel just did not allow for any bit of error in her controls. Was this the standard a newbie should have? Ling Lan, having been electrocuted to within an inch of her life, was filled with simmering indignation. Hells. It was like she thought, nothing good ever came from men who liked to smile. After God knows how many failures, Ling Lan's spirit was worn down to the brink. After one last electrocution, she was summarily thrown out of the mission space, and Ling Lan blearily found herself in the great hall of the learning space once again. The hall was no longer as messy as when Ling Lan had first arrived. Little Four had tidied up the floor. When he saw Ling Lan appear suddenly before him, he was startled by her appearance and yelled, "Boss, you were electrocuted." Ling Lan's head was heavy, she only stared uncomprehendingly at Little Four in response. Seeing this, Little Four couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. With a sympathetic flick of his finger, a large full-length mirror appeared before Ling Lan. In the reflection of the mirror, a completely black figure looked out blankly at them. There were even wisps of black smoke still wafting off the figure, the only break in the black being the whites of the figure's eyes. Oh, right, the figure's teeth were still white too. Ling Lan bared her teeth at the mirror, revealing her set of straight white teeth. Contrasted with the black, her teeth gleamed even whiter than usual. Not just that, Ling Lan's hair was all standing up, puffed up in curls. They reminded Ling Lan of the instant noodles of her past life. Really, her appearance was as bizarre as one could imagine. Number 3. I want to kill him. This horrible state of hers made Ling Lan scream out in frustration. Right now, she did not look one bit like the cute Moshoda that she usually looked like. She was a total black phantom that had crawled out from the hearth. Little Four smothered a laugh with his hand. Boss, so you've met number 3. Hee. Don't be fooled by his brash and forthright-looking face. He actually loves to play pranks on people. Ling Lan was stunned. You know them, Little Four? She had always thought that Little Four belonged to a different system than the instructors, and so would not meet each other. Looks like that wasn't the case. Of course, there are many things I don't understand which require their help, like with those battle. Well, I just know them. Little Four had almost let the truth slip. It turned out that those moves he had helped Ling Lan modify and appropriate was actually the hard work of the instructors. Little Four had just shamelessly claimed the credit for himself. Sensing something amiss with Little Four's words, Ling Lan stared at him suspiciously. Little Four's heart started pounding erratically, afraid that his deceit would be discovered by his boss. He quickly changed the topic, saying, Boss, how did you end up this way? At Little Four's question, Ling Lan was in no mood to think more about the holes in Little Four's speech. She sighed softly and said tiredly, Instructor number 3 gave me a mecha control mission. She scratched her head, mussing up her instant noodle hair into a bird's nest, and then shouted resentfully, Arg, he didn't teach me anything. Just told me to get through that crazily narrow beyond narrow tunnel within 3 minutes. How would that be possible? Ling Lan's words instantly made Little Four raise his little fists in anger as well. With sympathetic indignation, he said, Yeah, how could number 3 be so unreasonable? No matter what, he should give boss some time to adapt. Actually, he did in fact give me a week's time to finish it, admitted Ling Lan awkwardly. Then, boss, how did you end up so messed up? Wasn't it just training? Why did it look like she had to go through a mountain of swords and swim through a sea of flames? Gloomily, Ling Lan said, though it was training, every time I failed, I would be electrocuted. Little Four's eyes popped out in disbelief, and he muttered, How can that be? Electrocuted just for failing in training? When did the system become so strict? That said, he cast a pitying glance at Ling Lan. Boss, you're in big trouble. If you fail the mission this time, I think you'll lose a layer of skin even if you don't die. Hearing this, Ling Lan's spirits drooped even more. Yeah, I didn't expect to be electrocuted so badly just for failing in training. If I can't pass this mission a week later, Ling Lan shuddered violently, the sense of doom in her heart becoming even heavier. The learning space's punishments came in many bizarre forms, but every type would stay with you for the rest of your life. No one would be willing to go through it again if they could help it. Ling Lan had failed 10 times under instructor number 5's tutelage, and so had experienced a multitude of mind-breaking punishments. All in all, she really never wanted to experience them ever again. But it's really odd. Little Four sat on a step, face cupped in his hands as he said in a confused tone, Since you were given a time limit for completion, why would you still be punished after failing during training? Boss, this doesn't seem to match up with the system settings. Little Four was the most familiar with the system of the learning space. Although the system was very strict, its every step would be executed strictly according to the guidelines of the learning space. Could there be some other reason for this deviation in behavior? Hearing what Little Four had to say, Ling Lan couldn't help but wonder, could it be that instructor number 3 was intentionally messing with me? Little Four threw a disdainful glance at his boss. The instructors are only in charge of assigning missions, they don't have the jurisdiction to give out punishment. But Ling Lan persisted. Then what's up with instructor number 5's punishments? The degree of perversity involved is absolutely a sign of his work, Little Four explained. That's because boss had already failed the mission. Among all the punishments offered by the system, The instructor has the right to choose which one is implemented. Ling Lan understood then. However, this just deepened the mystery. Why would the system punish her for no reason when she only failed in training? Little Four searched through the rules of the learning space, and finally found a regulation that somewhat fit this strange scenario. Boss, when you were training, did you do anything against the rules? During training, if the host did anything the system viewed as breaking its rules, the system would implement appropriate punishment according to the severity of the violation. Ling Lan gave it some serious thought, and felt that other than controlling the mecha to jump and slam into walls, she really had not done anything else. Could it be that the system considered her wall slamming as the terrible sin of vandalism, and assigned punishment for it? Ling Lan told Little Four her guess, and Little Four thumped the table in agreement. His boss's assumption made sense. However, Little Four was extremely curious. Boss, why did you have to jump and slam into the wall? Wouldn't it be fine if you just walked slowly? Ling Lan said with some embarrassment. Isn't it all because of that 3-minute countdown timer? I wanted to speed up and quickly complete the mission, but the faster I went, the harder the mecha was to control. And once I hit a wall, the mecha would bounce around like a rubber ball, making it impossible for me to control. Ahem. In the end, I could only become a dizzy rabbit. When a mecha receives a concussive force, 30% of it would be realistically reflected upon Ling Lan's body. Even if Ling Lan's body was as strong as an ox, the consecutive impacts and tumbles had still been too much for Ling Lan. Disoriented and unwell, she had thoroughly experienced what it felt like to be a rabbit slamming into a tree. Boss, you know very well that you won't be able to complete this mission within 3 minutes with your current ability level. So, why are you rushing it? Why don't you first familiarize yourself with the controls to get the rabbit to walk? Slow down as much as possible and work hard so you don't hit the wall. Take your time and walk through the tunnel slowly and familiarize yourself with the path. Wouldn't that be better? Little Four just could not understand Ling Lan's decision. After all, didn't she have an entire week to figure it out? Why was she so impatient? Ling Lan said moodily. It's not that I don't want to. But instructor number 3 said, if I fail there would be punishment. Also, once the time is up, I'll be brought back to the starting point. How am I supposed to get used to the tunnel? Suddenly, Ling Lan jerked, thinking of something. Her gaze brightened instantly. Thank you, Little Four. Before Little Four could react to this outburst, Ling Lan had pulled Little Four into a hug and dropped a smacking kiss onto his soft and pink little cheek. This sudden affectionate action immediately crashed Little Four's thought processes. His 2 eyes were wide as saucers, and his entire body froze up. Ling Lan did not notice that Little Four's spirit had been sent flying off by her unexpected kiss. She took a few large strides to stand once more before the doorway of Mecha, and purposefully pushed it open. She needed to test her hypothesis to see whether she was right. Entering the doorway, she saw instructor number 3 still standing beside that rabbit mecha. Seeing Ling Lan return, instructor number 3 said with an expression of surprise, I thought you were only coming back tomorrow? How do you still have strength to train? Ling Lan said coldly, I'm not that weak. If it really was as she thought, instructor number 3 was really just too sly. Instructor number 3 seemed not to see Ling Lan's dark expression. With a hearty laugh, he said, that's great. Get into the mecha then. Chapter 117, The Learning Spaces Warning. Ling Lan smoothly leapt up into the mecha's cockpit, and then swiftly closed the door and activated the mecha. After 3 minutes, on the lower right corner of the display screen, the 3-minute countdown timer appeared once more. As before, the numbers flashed at her, a constant reminder of their presence. This time, Ling Lan only took one glance at the numbers before looking away. This was not because the string of numbers made her nervous, but because she wanted to focus on the final image being displayed on the screen. Sure enough, the image on the screen changed, and Ling Lan was once again at the entrance of the test tunnel. The learning space did not give Ling Lan much time to prepare. The numbers on the bottom of the screen began to roll. The countdown had begun. This time, Ling Lan did not rush. She did not try to increase her hand speed desperately to push the mecha out as fast as she could. Instead, she chose to decrease her hand speed. Her current speed was definitely not fast, with some pauses mixed in at times. She worked hard to coordinate her two hands, and facing the small and narrow tunnel, she controlled the rabbit mecha to hop lightly into it. This hop was very short, not even 2 meters, not even the length of her rabbit mecha's body. However, this caution guaranteed that she made no mistakes this time. Slowly but steadily, she hopped her way to the center of the tunnel. There were still no mistakes. Ling Lan did not rush to make the next jump. Only after properly calculating the distance needed did she flex her fingers and operated the mecha to jump. Having calmed down, no longer affected by the 3-minute countdown, Ling Lan now noticed that this seemingly straight tunnel actually had a slight curve to it. However, it would not be noticeable with the naked eye when moving at fast speeds. Right then, Ling Lan finally understood why she had kept slamming into walls previously. Having been unaware of the curve of the tunnel walls, even if she had used the coordinate data provided by the mecha and jumped to the marked coordinates, it would not have helped, because in reality, she had already made a judgment error. All that awaited her was a crash into a wall. 3 minutes time wasn't very long, but it also wasn't very short. Ling Lan had just made her way through roughly 30 or so meters of the tunnel, avoiding several obstacles along the way, when her time ran out. However, Ling Lan was not aware of this, because this time, strangely enough, the learning space did not impose punishment the moment the countdown hit 0. The electrocution did not happen, and Ling Lan also was not chased back to the starting point. Instead, after the timer hit 0, it did not stop, but continued to count down, going into the negatives. All this happened silently, so Ling Lan, who was thoroughly focused on operating her mecha, noticed nothing. Only after she had jumped a few more times, going about 10 meters deeper into the tunnel, did she remember to turn and look at the countdown timer. Ling Lan was wondering why the 3 minutes seemed to stretch on for so long this time. Ling Lan glanced at the timer and saw that the timer was still moving, but this time, the numbers were not getting smaller, but getting larger and larger. In fright, Ling Lan abruptly stopped her hands, and the rabbit mecha immediately froze and lay down on the ground. Looking closer, Ling Lan finally saw that the countdown timer was now displaying negative numbers. In other words, she had long gone beyond the allocated 3 minutes. Ling Lan started to think. Before this, she had been too anxious, desperately increasing her speed to charge and slam her way through the course, so much so that she completely ignored her surroundings. Thus, she had slammed into the walls repeatedly, and the final outcome was getting electrocuted after the timer ran out and being sent back to the beginning. Why did the learning space not react this time, seemingly content to let her do as she pleased? Ling Lan thought back to when she had pushed open the mecha door, and her conversation then with instructor number 3. She recalled how she had so easily fallen for instructor number 3's misdirection and believed that there would be punishment if she did not finish the mission after the 3 minutes on the timer ran out. She thought about how she had become overwhelmed with panic and frantically tried to make her mecha run forwards recklessly. She had really been so bloody stupid. She had actually forgotten that, in the learning space, before a mission's deadline was up, there would not be any punishment for failing in training. She had had 7 full years of learning experience, and she had completely forgotten everything in that split second. No wonder the learning space had gotten mad. It had to be said that, ever since she had managed to obtain Ling Zhao's legacy from right under the military's noses, Ling Lan had become a little cocky. This made her lose her initial sense of caution. Ling Lan mocked herself. How shameful. I actually neglected such an obvious clue, and this trap would have been discovered easily if I had just stopped to think. Is this because I've lost my mental balance? Because I thought I was stronger than most other people, so I became too proud? Was the learning space trying to tell me through punishment that I still don't have the right to strut around with my tail up one? Ling Lan had the realization that this electrocution wasn't punishing her for failing, but was punishing her for her recklessness and carelessness, as well as her loss of mental balance. This was a warning from the learning space. Ling Lan's lips curved up into a slight smile, her eyes glittering. Although the learning space was somewhat offbeat at times, It would always step in to prevent her from making mistakes at key moments. She really felt that she was extremely fortunate to have received the learning space. Having thought things through, Ling Lan's mind was at peace. She no longer worried about the so-called countdown timer, but merely focused all her attention on operating the mecha to slowly maneuver her way through this tunnel. The start of the tunnel was so narrow that it only allowed one mecha to squeeze through at a time, and though the tunnel gradually widened out, the number of obstacles also increased. There were even sections where there were obstacle piles, which required several consecutive hops to clear. Ling Lan overcame each and every one of the challenges of the tunnel, but then, a new problem appeared. A huge boulder appeared before Ling Lan, and there just was not enough space on either side of the boulder for the large rabbit mecha to pass through. Moreover, there were several rocks of uneven height below the large boulder as well. This completely prevented any challenger from passing through the bottom of the boulder. It only took one look for Ling Lan to determine the path she should take. Right at the top of the boulder, there was a coincidental gap with just enough room for the rabbit mecha to leap through. Note that she said leap through. In other words, this time, she needed to make sure the rabbit mecha jumped high enough to reach the gap and moved forwards enough to clear the boulder, otherwise it would be all too easy to slam into the rock. Ling Lan let the rabbit mecha's AI analyze the path she needed to take for this jump, along with the controls necessary for it. She then visualized it over and over in her mind, and only after she felt somewhat confident about it, did she get ready to move. She controlled the mecha to retreat around 10 meters. The boulder was too tall, so she needed to use a run-up approach to build up momentum. The first time, Ling Lan sprinted up to the rock, but when she reached the jumping point, she felt that there was a deviation in her positioning and hit the emergency brakes. The mecha only managed to stop at a distance of 0.01 meters away from the rock, scaring the cold sweat out of Ling Lan. The second time, she got the jumping position right, but she did not use enough power to reach the required height. Luckily, Ling Lan reacted quickly. At the moment she was about to hit the rock, she controlled the rabbit to kick out with its limbs at the rock, sending the mecha into a flip. She then controlled the mecha to land safely, avoiding the tragedy of slamming into the boulder. These two failures gave Ling Lan a better idea of what to expect. On her third try, with a steady grasp of all the key points, Ling Lan successfully got her mecha to leap swiftly through the gap at the top of the boulder. At this moment, Ling Lan was still unaware that making her way through the various obstacles in the course had steadily built up her proficiency with the rabbit mecha's controls. From being flustered at the beginning, till being able to handle unforeseen circumstances with ease now, Ling Lan's improvement was truly phenomenal. Meanwhile, Ling Lan was still adjusting. In order to handle all sorts of scenarios, she had subconsciously begun slowly merging the combat moves she had learned in real life with her mecha control process. And this was truly the ultimate objective of this tunnel mission. Within the learning space, the passing standard for mecha operators was that a mecha operator had to be able to control a mecha as if it were their own hands and feet, just as if the mecha were an extension of their own bodies. And this wasn't something many people could do in the real world. So, if Ling Lan wanted to pass, she still had much training to do to hone her mecha control. This also gave Ling Lan the false impression for a while that her mecha control was terrible. After overcoming several more obstacles, Ling Lan finally arrived at the finish line, completing a full run of the tunnel. The time she used was slightly less than 32 minutes and 13 seconds. Of course, this duration was worlds apart from the mission requirement of 3 minutes. Still, Ling Lan wasn't particularly worried. This was because she knew that she had limited her hand speed for this run, keeping it at a normal level. Besides, this first full run was just to map out the tunnel and get to know the situation inside it, so she had wasted a lot of time at every obstacle. The second time would be different. Reality proved that it was indeed as Ling Lan had expected. The second time, Ling Lan directly shortened the time used to 23 minutes. And her third pass was infinitely close to 20 minutes. However, this time became her current limit. In the following fourth, fifth, and sixth attempts, she maintained this result, never being able to break past the 20-minute barrier. To ensure that she did not make a mistake and slam into the wall again, Ling Lan still did not unleash her hand speed. She continued to use the hand speed she used at the start to control the mecha. But after testing out several different ways of jumping without being able to break past the 20-minute barrier, Ling Lan decided to increase her hand speed by one level. However, after raising her hand speed, Ling Lan started making mistakes. Although she was still extremely careful, she still could not help but lose control at a particularly sharp turn, slipping out of her intended path to careen towards the wall. But Ling Lan reacted quickly, no longer allowing herself to slam helplessly into the wall like before. Instead, she used all four limbs of the mecha to kick off from the wall, and riding the rebound, she moved her mecha back on the correct path. Of course, this was also due to the fact that her speed was not yet at the maximum, and so was still within the limits of Ling Lan's control. Just like this, she shuffled and stumbled her way through the tunnel. She then found that her time had not gotten any better, and had in fact gotten slower than before, clocking in at around 21 minutes. However, Ling Lan was not discouraged. This new speed would require some adjustment, and in the process of adjustment, it was perfectly normal to make some mistakes. As such, the time delay was within her expectations. When she managed to fully get used to the new speed, Ling Lan was sure that she would be able to shorten the time to below 20 minutes. And so Ling Lan maintained this speed, and went through the tunnel again and again, making adjustment after adjustment. The night passed without conversation. Ling Lan did not even know when she was kicked out by the learning space. From early the next day, aside from the classes that she had to attend, Ling Lan spent all her time in the learning space training to pass the mission. Of course, to reassure her mom, Ling Lan pretended to be in the virtual world by lying in a login pod. Ling Lan naturally also did not forget to instruct Little Four to fake her appearance in the virtual world to collect information from all the major subject halls. She had not forgotten the threat within the military. It would not do to let that party notice anything amiss. Chapter 118. The real number 1 of year 4738. Ling Lan stood once more at the entrance to the tunnel. She had never stopped challenging it. She closed her eyes and counted the seconds, and then abruptly opened them again. Her eyes blazed with a vibrant light, and her fingers flew in a coordinated dance. With a strong push of its hind legs, the rabbit mecha bounded into the tunnel. At this moment, Ling Lan's entire body and soul were immersed in the mecha. She already knew the situation within the tunnel like the back of her hand, so there was no need for her to even think about how to overcome the obstacles. All of it was already a steady flow within her mind. The rabbit mecha leapt and soared nimbly within that small and narrow space. At times it crawled, at times it leapt, at times it moved rapidly, at times it slowed to turn. Quite a few times it narrowly scraped by a wall, where just a hairsprit closer would mean a forceful crash and a violent tumble. This time, Ling Lan did not hit the wall at all, successfully making her way through the tunnel swiftly. She looked down at the time. As expected, she had finally broken past the 20-minute barrier. In fact, she had improved her time by a whole 5 minutes, ending the course within 15 minutes. Compared to her first time, Ling Lan had undoubtedly reduced her time by half. However, to achieve the 3 minutes required to complete the mission, Ling Lan still had a long way to go. Still, Ling Lan was very happy. This progress proved that her control of the rabbit mecha had improved by a substantial margin. Ling Lan wasn't anxious to raise her hand speed further at this point. Instead, she continued to work on stabilizing her current hand speed. She practiced over and over again. Running the same obstacle course repetitively was very dry and boring. Making the mecha jump and leap and run to break through obstacles may have been new and exciting for the first run or two, but after the 10th time and beyond, all that was left was boredom. Fortunately, Ling Lan was a very tolerant person. The dry monotony and boredom of the exercise were not enough to turn her off and make her choose to give up halfway. In this manner, she stayed in her house for 3 to 4 consecutive days. Then, Ling Lan was dragged out of the learning space by Little Four over an unexpected occurrence. Back then, Ling Lan had been focused on her training in the tunnel to try and apply a higher hand speed. Just as she had been running, the scene in front of her eyes suddenly twisted and spun, becoming blurred and unfocused. By the time Ling Lan could see clearly again, she had already been brought to the Great Hall of the Learning Space. Little Four was waiting for her there with an anxious expression. Seeing Ling Lan come out, Little Four immediately rushed over as he shouted, "Boss, hurry! Qilong and the others are looking for you." During this time, Little Four had been substituting Ling Lan to enter the virtual world, so he was also responsible for reporting anything of note that happened there. "Can't you handle it?" Ling Lan automatically assumed it was something to do with the virtual world. That's why she was rather surprised, because Little Four had patted his chest and guaranteed that he would be able to handle anything in the virtual world back when he had first taken on this duty. "It's a real-world issue. They were just trying to contact you online, and it looks urgent. They want you to go to the combat hall immediately. It looks like something major is happening," explained Little Four in a hurry. Ling Lan was rather bewildered, unsure what could have happened to make Qilong and the others so anxious. With a worried heart, she quickly left the learning space and climbed out of the login pod to the virtual world. She took a moment to change into a clean uniform, and then immediately set out for the combat hall. The moment she arrived at the entrance to the combat hall, Ling Lan found that there was an unusually large crowd here today. She took a swift look around, and found that there were not just students from her grade, but also quite a number of students from the other grades. There were younger juniors who had just started school here, as well as seniors from a grade or two higher. Among the groupings of blue and green, Ling Lan could even see some white and red. Looks like there were also quite a few students from the special classes. Ling Lan grew even more curious. What in the world had happened to make the students of the lower division gather here? Although the Scout Academy had 10 grades, these grades were in fact split into 3 different divisions. Grades 1 to 4 made up the lower division, 5 to 7 was the intermediate division, and 8 to 10 was the upper division. The students of every division had their own circles, and aside from those with intent, very few people were willing to cross these circles to get to know the students of the other divisions. Just take Ling Lan's group for example. They may know about the matters concerning the lower division students, but they only knew vague details about things to do with the intermediate division, and the upper division was completely out of the consideration of these lower division children. Ling Lan immediately contacted Qilong, and finding out that the others were at Arena 3, she hurried over. On the way there, Ling Lan's ostentatious red uniform drew the admiration and envy of the surrounding merit class and regular class students. Although Ling Lan kept a rather low profile within the academy, there were still quite a few people who recognized her. These people were talking in hushed whispers to the people beside them who didn't know Ling Lan. "Do you know who that person in the red uniform is?" said one of the informed grade 1 students excitedly to a student beside him whom he had just met. "A special class A student? From which grade?" "I don't think I saw him at the cross-grade challenge matches." Some of the people who had no acquaintances in the upper grades naturally did not know much about their seniors. "You should at least know about Qilong, right?" Qilong had obtained the top rank of the special classes multiple times in succession, and so had often appeared at the cross-grade challenge fights. Thus, even the new students knew him. "Of course I know. The leading person in the second grade. I've seen him in the cross-grade challenge matches. I get excited just speaking of him. In the last challenge, he actually managed to challenge all the way up to grade 4 before losing. He really makes us lower grades proud." It looked like this new student was a fan of Qilong's. His face was filled with idolization. Let me tell you. That person just now is Qilong's boss. He is also in the second grade." The informed one was very smug. He actually knew about the strongest hidden boss. "No way!" Shocked cries rang out one after another. Eavesdroppers drawn by their discussion all had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Qilong was the high-profile academy star of the lower grades. How could a superior being like him submit and acknowledge another person as boss so easily? And someone from the same grade at that, with a lower ranking. HMPH. You really think Qilong dominates the second grade? If my elder cousin's sister wasn't in that grade, I may not have known about this secret. The ones who paid attention to the internal grade rankings were basically those in the same grade. Very few students from other grades would bother with the rankings of another grade, which was why most people from the lower grades and the upper grades would not know the internal matters. What secret? Tell us quick. Those who loved uncovering the truth all began urging the informant to hurry up and reveal the secret he knew. My cousin's sister said that every time that person encountered Qilong, he would automatically forfeit, never ever choosing to attack. Why? Everyone wondered. Is it because he knew he couldn't win, so he chose not to fight? That doesn't mean that person is stronger than Qilong though, someone objected. I have proof. You all know that in the grade ranking matches, what's the least number of moves Qilong took to defeat his opponent? Yup. I remember someone mention it once. I think it was 3 moves. Against the weakest opponent in the first round. Qilong's combat skills are amazing. He's not just agile, his strength is also greater than others his age by too much. On top of that, his foundations are very solid, and I heard he has some sure kill moves as well. But as the opponents get stronger, Qilong also can't defeat them that easily anymore. From around 10 moves to over 10 moves. Even using up to several hundred moves. That's why I say, Qilong is strong, but he still hasn't reached the level of domination, said the informant airily, nodding as he heard what everyone had to say about Qilong's abilities. You can't say that. Anyone who can enter the special classes in our academy is a talent from the cream of the crop. Qilong being able to press down everyone his age already proves that he is extremely outstanding. The other people felt that the informant was being rather unreasonable with his comments. Once, that person managed to defeat an opponent in. Guess how many moves? Asked the informant coldly, in response to the others doubting his words. What's his strength like? You can't just ask us to guess blindly without any comparison point. That opponent was also from the special classes. Qilong managed to defeat that person in roughly 50 moves. The informant provided a comparison point. About 50 moves? Could it be less than the number of moves Qilong needed? Seeing the informant's impassive face, everyone was shocked. 40 moves, or maybe 30 moves? The informant just smiled but said nothing. Everyone there drew a cold breath. 20 or so moves? Maybe about over 10 moves? Everyone felt that their guesses were already very bold. Sadly, the informant did not seem to agree. He shook his head, sighing, and said, "Can't you all be more daring with your guesses?" Within 10 moves? In a sea of silence, a wavering voice piped up quietly. This guess made everyone hold their breath, waiting for the informant to respond. Within 10 moves? You're all wrong. He only used 1 move, revealed the informant proudly, just as if Ling Lan was his own boss. Whoa, that's strong? There was a cacophony as everyone exclaimed in shock. If this were true, then that person was definitely the reigning champ of the second grade. I predict that, if they really fought, even Qilong wouldn't be able to hold out for long. The informant finally gave his hypothesis. Then why would he choose to forfeit? If he became the top rank, then he would be able to participate in the cross-grade challenge. Some people felt it was a shame, because they had not been able to see that person's awesomeness in defeating his opponent in 1 move. Who knows, perhaps he prefers to keep a low profile. An oracle of truth one presented himself. Right. What's that person called? Those with superior strength would always garner respect. The surrounding students were eager to find out the identity of their new idol from the informant. Ling Lan, the true number 1 of year 4738 too. Ling Lan deeply mourned the fact that her hearing was so sharp. She had actually heard every single bit of gossip loud and clear. She had already tried her best to keep a low profile. Who knew that someone had still found her memorable? Still, Ling Lan wasn't really bothered. This gossip would probably just circulate among the lower division. The upper division would have no interest in following the gossip within their circle. So, no one outside would care or recognize her. Very soon, she had rushed to Arena 3. And she immediately saw Qilong and the others waiting in front of the stage. Ling Lan walked over quickly and asked, "Qilong, Why did you call me to come over in such a hurry? What exactly is going on? Subconsciously, Qilong glanced at Han Zhejian, cluing Linglan in that it was probably Han Zhejian's idea to call her here. Sure enough, Han Zhejian received Qilong's signal, and spoke up, "Boss Lan, I was the one who asked Qilong to call you here. Actually, calling you here this time is to discuss the matter of Lin Zonking. Is there any connection to us?" Linglan was too busy. She did not have that much time and effort to go worry about the other students in her class who she was just on regular terms with. Of course there's no connection right now, but there'll soon be one. The corner of Han Zhejian's lips quirked up, and there was actually a trace of deviousness in his smirk. Chapter 119, Taking Lin Zonking in as a follower. Han Zhejian's words made Linglan very curious. With a slight quirk of her brow, she waited for Han Zhejian to continue explaining. Earlier, Lin Zonking contacted me urgently in the virtual world. He hopes that we can help him out, because he has been blockaded by Li Yingji. What? That punk Li Yingji hasn't given up on making Lin Zonking submit? Linglan was rather speechless to hear that. This Li Yingji was really too stubborn. Starting back in the first grade, ever since Lin Zonking had refused to be his subordinate, this brat had been determined to pick a bone with Lin Zonking. He kept finding opportunities to make trouble for Lin Zonking, trying to make Lin Zonking submit to him. As luck would have it, Lin Zonking was also someone who was open to persuasion but not to coercion. The more Li Yingji tried to force the issue, the more he refused to submit. Thus, the two of them had become locked in a never-ending feud. It can't be helped. Li Yingji is now stuck riding the Tiger One. Ever since he hit a dead end with Lin Zonking, he thoroughly lost all credibility to become the boss of the special classes. Many students in class are now just agreeing in words but not in mind. Some have even mocked him behind his back, saying that he should handle Lin Zonking first before doing the talking. So, this year hasn't been easy for Lin Zonking. There was one more thing Han Zhejian didn't say. Another reason why Li Yingji couldn't become the undisputed boss of year 4738 was the existence of their group. Compared to Lin Zonking, Li Yingji actually hated them even more for blocking his way. It's just that Qilong alone was already hard for him to handle, not to mention Linglan, who was stronger than Qilong. So, Li Yingji, who was unable to take his anger out on them, could only go after the vulnerable Lin Zonking who had no one backing him. At the heart of the matter, Lin Zonking was actually collateral damage of Li Yingji's dispute with them. Han Zhejian sighed deeply. Although the academy tried its best to minimize the influence of family background among the students, setting up lots of regulations preventing students from possessing special rights due to their backgrounds, was there any child who was stupid among those who could enter the Central Scout Academy's special classes? A full year of time and more had been enough for them to seek out the loopholes in these regulations. With that, they managed to artfully avoid the rigid external protection of the academy, using other methods within the boundaries of the rules to force some children without reliable backgrounds to become their attendants, subordinates, or even gophers. In Special Class A, most of the children came from some sort of weighted background. After all, genes determined everything. It was much more likely for a powerful and wealthy elite family to produce an outstanding child. So, in the Special Class A of year 4738, there were only 3 or 4 people from more common family backgrounds. Besides Lin Zonking, who stood his ground to keep his independence, the others had all chosen to rely on other classmates with stronger abilities and backgrounds. Among the array of wealthy and powerful backgrounds present in the class, Ling Lan's background, leaving aside Ling Zhao's identity, was considered insignificant, but no one dared to bother him. In the academy, background wasn't the most important thing. Might was the foundation which truly allowed a person to stand their ground. Though Lin Zonking, who had come from a poor district, had been gradually increasing his strength, the top 5 of the class could still handle him easily. In other words, Lin Zonking was the easiest to handle among all of the Special Class A children. Who else could Li Yingji target if not him? However, Lin Zonking himself knew that he would not be able to stand up against Li Yingji, so he had chosen to tolerate. No matter how much Li Yingji taunted him or insulted him, he had taken it and refused to react. This made Han Jijian admire him greatly for his ability to restrain himself for a greater purpose. Hasn't he been targeted before all this while? Didn't he manage to resolve it all himself so far? Why does he want our help this time? Ling Lan was curious. She knew very well that even though Lin Zonking was a poor commoner, he had a prideful heart. Unless there was no other choice, he wouldn't have reached out for their help. What could have happened? What could be grave enough to corner Lin Zonking? Ling Lan stroked her jaw absent-mindedly as she thought about it. Han Jijian replied, "It's like this. Lin Zonking told me that the opponent invoked the rule of nemesis combat, and challenged him to an arena battle. The one who loses will have to recognize the other as boss, and become his subordinate. A nemesis combat match cannot be avoided. The moment one chooses to refuse the fight, the Academy AI will see that as a forfeit and automatically declare it as the loss of the side which refused." This time, Li Yingji was smart. He used the combat rules of the Academy. How did Lin Zonking fall for it? Hasn't he always been careful? To avoid Li Yingji's taunts and challenges, Lin Zonking had learned all he could about the Academy's rules. He was always careful to stay away from things that wouldn't benefit him, but it looks like he had been set up this time. Yes, well, in the virtual world, Li Yingji recruited a regular class student and sent him to offend Lin Zonking. You know how all the students of Special Class A have their pride. They would never permit someone else to trample over it easily. So, Lin Zonking chose to teach him a lesson. And then, this was the result. The other boy recorded a video of himself being beaten up and submitted it to the school AI to request for a nemesis combat match. After it was approved, he challenged Lin Zonking. Under nemesis combat mode, Lin Zonking cannot refuse, so he had no choice but to accept. Ling Lan naturally knew what was going on instantly. Looks like Li Yingji really invested a lot of thought and effort to trap Lin Zonking. For this plan, he had to complete the team formation mission in the virtual world. He's most likely the third person of our second grade to succeed in building a team. Only teams would allow the members of the team to substitute amongst themselves freely. And so, in the end, the one Lin Zonking had to fight was no longer that regular class student, but Li Yingji. That fellow is really willing to pay to get Lin Zonking. Actually willing to waste a team member slot. Each team only had 6 member slots, and after the members had been chosen, the team members could no longer be changed. The existence of teams was a way for the Academy to foster cooperation and team battle sense among the students. It was also a way to cultivate lasting bonds among team members, so that the team members would be able to learn more responsibility by watching out for each other, lending each other a hand, and progressing together. The growth and strength of each individual member of the team would also be a determining factor in when they'd be able to enter the real virtual world. Once students reached the age of 13, they would have the right to challenge for the right to exit. If successful, the Central Scout Academy would remove the restrictions on those children, and give them free access to the virtual world. Mind you, only in the extended virtual world would they be able to experience mecha controls, and this was the dream of all the students of the Scout Academy. All the children dreamed of the day they could operate mecha. Thus, every team was very particular about its members. They wouldn't take in just anyone, unless a team member accidentally becomes incapacitated. That's why, the members of a team were definitely the best of friends. Steadfast comrades that one would be willing to fight beside till they graduated from the Scout Academy. What does Lin Zonking want exactly? Ling Lan had an inkling of what Lin Zonking's objective was, and her brow furrowed slightly. He wants to join us. Sure enough, Han Jijian gave voice to the answer Ling Lan had thought of. I don't find him promising. Ling Lan didn't really like Lin Zonking. She felt that Lin Zonking was just too tolerant. In contrast with Ling Lan's voluntary self-restraint and tolerance, Lin Zonking's brand of tolerance was forced by external pressure. As a result, he was very moody and somber, and his gaze was always dark with murky shadows. Letting this kind of person join them may very well bring an unstable element into their team. Ling Lan was totally preparing to lead Qilong and the others to beat the exit challenge the moment they all turned 13. As such, she didn't want there to be any surprises. He's stated clearly that he wants to become boss's subordinate, and that he's willing to serve you loyally, added Han Jijian. It looked like he really favored Lin Zongqing's addition to their team. Ling Lan still wasn't moved. She had the Ling family loyalists, who were way more reliable than Lin Zongqing. Actually, Lin Zongqing is not a bad addition. In my opinion, he chose us only after thinking it over very seriously. He probably wouldn't betray us. You should know that right now, in Special Class A, there are only 2 teams which can match up with Li Yingji's group. One would be the Wujian Yizu team, and the other is our team, explained Luo Lang, chiming in. But the Wujian Yizu team is aligned with the federal military system, and Lin Zongqing really dislikes this sort of authoritarian elitism. So, he doesn't really want to join them, which is why he chose us. And we're not aligned with the federal military system? Asked Ling Lan in confusion. She cast a doubtful glance at the boys standing before her, poking fun at their backgrounds. She had learned about their family backgrounds after over a year of hanging out together. Qilong, Han Jijian, and Luo Lang were all descended from upper-ranking federal military families. The 3 boys couldn't help but laugh. Still chuckling, Qilong retorted, "But boss, you aren't. Whether or not we are aligned with the federal military system depends on your identity as our leader." Ling Lan scratched her face in embarrassment. She wasn't sure whether she should tell them now that she was actually aligned with the federal military system after all. In the past, she had thought that with her father's death, that her family was just an extremely normal martyr's family, which would definitely have nothing to do with the federal military system. Therefore, she had told Han Jijian and the others that she came from a middle-average family, and that her father had just been sacrificed in battle before she was born. And so, back when Ling Lan had just discovered her father Ling Zhao's true identity, she had been very conflicted. She just didn't know how she could re-explain her identity to her companions now. You all want to accept Lin Zongqing? Ling Lan wasn't a self-opinionated person. Although she didn't particularly like Lin Zongqing, she still decided that she would listen to what everyone had to say. Yeah, Lin Zongqing's potential is great, and he puts in a lot of effort into studying. His improvement is obvious. In the most recent ranking tournament, he managed to make it into the top 15. His future results shouldn't be too much off the mark. Boss, taking him in as a follower should bring us no disadvantages, analyzed Han Jijian. But we'll just have to go up against Li Yingji's group. Ling Lan considered whether it was worth it to take on this troublesome issue for Lin Zongqing's sake. Isn't that pretty interesting? With no rivals, no competition, our improvement will be much slower, said Han Jijian with a smile as he looked to one side. It was Li Yingji and company. Right then, Han Jijian's gaze was somewhat piercing, a little different from how it was usually. A notion passed through Ling Lan's mind. While the innate talents of Qilong, Luo Lang, and herself were geared towards combat, Han Jijian's wasn't. His innate talent belonged to the intelligence stream. In other words, he could not rely solely on book learning or fighting to increase his abilities, but had to clash wits often with others. Ling Lan thought of her future plans. Han Jijian was definitely one of the most integral links in the chain. Only if Han Jijian became more capable would she be able to accomplish what she wanted to do perfectly. So Ling Lan nodded and said, "All right, I agree." Chapter 120. Joining officially. Ling Lan's agreement caused the smile on Han Jijian's face to deepen, and his gaze brightened even more. Perhaps Han Jijian had found a game he wanted to play, and so his spirits were running high. When Han Jijian wasn't paying attention, Qilong nudged Luo Lang lightly with a shoulder, and asked quietly, "Did your initiate instructor arrange some sort of mission?" Luo Lang was startled, somewhat unable to wrap his mind around how sharp Qilong's instincts were. This was because Qilong always gave off a brash and forthright vibe, and seemed like he would be extremely careless. However, Luo Lang very quickly gathered his thoughts and nodded almost imperceptibly with a subtle dip of his chin, telling Qilong that he had guessed correctly. Qilong grinned. Only he knew that he had guessed so easily, not because he was intuitive, but because his initiate instructor had also given him a mission. So, seeing Han Jijian suddenly become so proactive, his mind connected the dots to his own situation, which was why he had jumped to this assumption so quickly. How about this? Let's leave Qilong in charge of this matter. Ling Lan currently intended to cultivate Qilong as the spokesperson for their team, wanting to put him in charge of representing their public image. This was because Qilong's appearance was bright, lively and extremely positive, easily gaining the trust of others. In the future, no matter what mission they accepted, this disposition of his would be an unexpected boon when cooperating with others. As Ling Lan had been trolled multiple times by the smiling faces of instructors number 3 and number 5, she believed that people who smiled like they were kindly gentlemen were often representatives with black innards, bellies filled with murky waters of deceit and evil intentions. Therefore, she wasn't particularly fond of that kind of smile. In addition, she had the utmost respect for instructor number 1, and held instructor number 9 in high esteem, and these two people were classic slackface representatives. This led her current expressions and speaking tone to gradually shift infinitely closer towards the behavioral patterns of those two instructors. In Little Four's words, right now was the developmental phase of the slackface Shota. Ling Lan's arrangement boggled Qilong. What was he supposed to be in charge of? I'm saying that Lin Zonking will be your attending follower. You'll be responsible for him. Since she would be pushing Qilong to take center stage, then it made sense for her to assign a lackey to him, right? Besides, Ling Lan had way too many secrets, which made it unsuitable for someone to keep following her around. Later, when you fight in the arena, you need to do your best, alright? Otherwise, you'll lose your follower. Ling Lan patted Qilong's shoulder in encouragement, and then washed her hands of the responsibility. Yet, Qilong didn't care about Ling Lan's unexplained transfer of duties to him. He was in excitement mode. As a battle freak, the moment he heard the words arena and fight, his blood boiled, and he just wished he could rush over immediately to the stage to satisfy a little of his battle lust. Although that punk Li Yingji was somewhat iffy in the way he handled things, his personal combat ability was not bad, good enough to be Qilong's opponent. Meanwhile, Han Jijian had already got hold of Lin Zonking via communicator, and told him to meet them secretly in a small room they opened for private arena combat. As this type of combat was set as private, no one would be able to get into the room without entering the correct password. Since Han Jijian was prepared to let Lin Zonking join the team, he would have to teach Li Yingji a lesson no matter what. In the process, he wanted to reap more benefits from Li Yingji, so he couldn't let Li Yingji find out that Lin Zonking had already joined their team. Very soon, Lin Zonking entered the private combat room. When he entered, Lin Zonking couldn't see anyone. But just as he was wondering if he got the wrong room, he saw Ling Lan and the others waiting for him in a corner of the room that had been in his blind spot. Out of worry that Lin Zonking could have been followed, Han Jijian had arranged it so that everyone was located within a blind spot when someone first enters the room. This would eliminate any chance of them being discovered by an unintended audience. Seeing the door close, Ling Lan and the others walked out of the corner. Lin Zonking carefully glanced at Ling Lan, who was standing in the middle of the group, and waited for the final verdict. Being able to join Ling Lan's team would undoubtedly be the best outcome for him. Ever since Ling Lan had helped him previously without even batting an eyelid, Lin Zonking had been extremely grateful towards Ling Lan. Back then, he had already been conflicted, wondering if he should lower his head and ask to join Ling Lan's group directly so that he could be under their protection. But at that time, he had just qualified for the Central Scout Academy and had also managed to become a special Class A student in one go. His pride and personal drive was high. He didn't want to become someone else's tag-along. Moreover, he was confident that he could evade Li Yingji's pressuring, and so the thought of joining Ling Lan's group came and went. However, reality was cruel. His relationship with Li Yingji became increasingly worse, until it reached the point where they were almost arch-enemies. Meanwhile, although he continued to improve, The more he learned, the more he could feel the distance between himself and the top 5 of Special Class A. Ling Lan, Qi Long, Li Yingji, Wu Jian, and Yi Zhu were the ironclad top 5. Their strength exceeded the other Class A students by a significant margin. It could be said that no one was even close to threatening their positions. Of the 5, Yi Zhu was the weakest, and while Li Yingji and Wu Jian were about equal in strength, Qi Long was overall stronger than them by a head. Needless to say, Ling Lan was the uncontested number 1 in the minds of all the students of their year. Although he had never truly obtained the top rank, the fact that his follower Qi Long had successfully earned the top rank 3 years in a row just proved how fearsome he was. In the intra-grade ranking fights, Lin Zonking had fought against Yi Zhu and Wu Jian before. Against them, he had only managed to hold out for 50 to 60 moves. Deep down, Lin Zonking knew that if the other had really used their sure kill moves, he would never have been able to hold out for that long. He could perhaps hold out for half that number of moves. The sheer pressure brought on by the gap between their levels let Lin Zonking lose without any resentment. Compared to the other 4 people, Lin Zonking was actually much more curious about Ling Lan. In fact, you could even say that he was brimming with questions. Before this, he had asked around in a roundabout way to find out more about Ling Lan's family background. He found out that Ling Lan was from a middle-class family, and was also a posthumous child. While he had still been in his mother's womb, his father had lost his life in one of the Federation's battlefields. Aside from having a slightly better background, Ling Lan and he had rather similar conditions. They didn't have any additional combat skills, and didn't have access to any battle experience from their elders. Then why did Ling Lan have such formidable battle power? Could it be a genetic issue? But they were just lower than Ling Lan by 1 level, so logically, the difference shouldn't be that large. Lin Zonking had also studied Ling Lan's fights before, and found that his battles were clean, precise, and efficient, never dragging things out. With only just 1 move used, there really was nothing to drag. Furthermore, his every attack was neither so strong that it was unstoppable, nor so fast that it was invisible. A simple straightforward move, without any extraneous frills or flourishes, directly aimed to strike at his opponent's biggest weakness. Of course, he himself was very familiar with those attack moves Ling Lan had used. They were all sourced from the basic physical skills set of the Central Scout Academy, with only some being sure kill techniques appropriated from other students. Originally, Lin Zonking hadn't known this, but then one time, he noticed Qin Yi's sure kill technique being executed perfectly by Ling Lan's hands, letting him defeat Yi Zhu in 1 move. Then, he had known that Ling Lan had the unbelievable ability to rapidly mimic and absorb others' sure kill techniques. This had also given him some insight on how Ling Lan could have become so strong. Ling Lan didn't have a formidable family background, nor did he have any additional combat skills, or so he thought, yet another poor babe being kept in the dark. And yet, he had become the number 1 of their year. Lin Zonking truly respected and admired Ling Lan from the heart. He felt that Ling Lan had brought honor to all the students from common family backgrounds. The only regret he had was that Ling Lan was very aloof, not seeming to care very much for the students around him. Aside from those few people from the start, after a whole year, it was still those few people who were close to him. Then, this time, he had unexpectedly fallen into a trap and was now forced to fight against Li Yingji directly. Lin Zonking knew that he was no match for Li Yingji, but he was unwilling to just roll over and become Li Yingji's subordinate, and so, he had thought of Ling Lan. If he really had to submit and become someone's subordinate, then he would much rather become Ling Lan's subordinate. Even though Wu Jian was also a good candidate, Lin Zonking wasn't as keen to submit to Wu Jian. Thus, he had taken the initiative to contact Han Zhijian online and put forward his request. He had thought that he would feel horrible doing it. After all, he had fought hard for independence for over a year, but still couldn't escape the tragic outcome of becoming a follower. The only consolation he had was that at least contacting Han Zhijian to submit to Ling Lan was his own choice. However, unexpectedly, the moment the words left his mouth, he had actually felt at peace. His heart seemed lighter, as if shedding a heavy weight too. Perhaps he had already been thinking about this for a long time subconsciously, but his pride and ego had not allowed him to consider it consciously. Now, Lin Zonking had came to face the person that could determine his future destiny. His initially steady heart actually started fluttering in panic. God damn it, he was actually nervous, and there were also feelings of fear. He was really afraid of being rejected. Lin Zonking, I have agreed to your request, but I'm used to acting alone, so, after this, you can just follow Qilong and the others. Ling Lan's words brought both joy and pain to Lin Zonking's heart. The joy was because he could finally join Ling Lan's team and receive their protection. The pain was because he had heard Ling Lan's rejection. Ling Lan wasn't taking him on as a follower personally, but handing him over to Qilong and the others, who knew there would come a day where he would be dismissed by another as a follower. Lin Zonking didn't know how to feel. He merely nodded his head in a daze to indicate that he understood. Only the team leader could request the addition of a team member. An individual wasn't able to randomly search for a team and request to join on their own. So, when Ling Lan saw Lin Zonking nod his acceptance, as the team leader, she used her communicator to connect to the academy's mainframe, and submitted the request form for Lin Zonking to enter her team. Once the request was approved, the AI would contact the team member listed on the form. Next, the team member need only enter the password of his communicator to complete the process and join the team. The AI very quickly checked Lin Zonking's information to confirm that he was currently a free agent. Then, it forwarded Ling Lan's invitation to Lin Zonking's communicator. Lin Zonking took a deep breath. He then resolutely pressed on a confirm button and entered his password. When he saw the congratulatory message confirming his addition to Ling Lan's team, Lin Zonking let out a large breath. It felt to him as if the dust had truly settled and he was back on solid ground. He hid it well though. No one else in the room noticed. Qilong, I leave the arena battle to you. Ling Lan had simultaneously received a notification informing her of the successful addition, along with a copy of all of Lin Zonking's data. As a team, they were considered as one entity, so all the team members' information was publicly available within the group. Meanwhile, any grudges on Lin Zonking's shoulders would also be extended to encompass the whole team. In other words, any of the other team members could substitute for Lin Zonking in the upcoming fight. This logic was exactly the same as the one behind Li Yingji's plot to trap Lin Zonking into a fight.